My husband changed completely after his business became successful. He didn't even bother hiding that he was cheating on me with another woman. When I finally confronted him, he just laughed at me and said, "You're worthless, you don't earn a thing. Be grateful I'm supporting you." I told him I'd get a job, but he just laughed again and told me to do whatever I wanted. So, I found a job at his parent company and started planning my revenge. My name is Karen. I'm 34 years old and was a homemaker. My husband, Michael, is 36 and owns a printing company. We first met at the same company years ago. I worked in the illustration department, and he was in sales. We fell in love and got married when I was 26. Once we were settled, Michael quit his job and asked me about starting his own business. I wasn't sure, so we talked with Bob, a CEO we knew from our old job who had become our friend and business partner. Bob invested in the business, and I was so grateful for his support. With his help, Michael and I started running the new company together. In the beginning, we struggled in a tiny apartment, but when the company grew, we were able to move into a high-rise condo. Then Michael asked me to stop working and be a homemaker instead. "I'll hire someone else for the illustrations," he said. "I want you to support me from home." I agreed, though I was sad to leave my illustration work. Bob was also disappointed but told me he'd support me if I ever wanted to get back into it. I became a homemaker and started posting my illustrations on Instagram as a hobby, which gave me a lot of happiness. Meanwhile, Michael's business kept growing, and so did our lifestyle. He bought a new car and custom-made suits, which I thought were a bit much, but I figured it was important for him as the company's owner. Even though he was busy, Michael always came home for dinner. It was something we promised to keep for just the two of us. Over dinner, he would usually tell me about his business plans, and I was happy to support his dreams. I thought things would always be like this. But as the company grew, Michael started acting differently. He stopped talking to me about the business during dinner. When I asked how things were going, he'd just say, "It's fine," without any enthusiasm. When I pressed him to share more, he snapped, "You wouldn't understand. You're always at home, you don't know anything about this." I was shocked to hear him say that, but I tried to convince myself he was just tired. That night, he finished his meal in silence and went straight to his room. This continued, and then he started having dinner out more often, saying it was for work. I'd still wait for him, skipping my own dinner, but he wouldn't come back until much later. Lately, my husband wouldn't even send an excuse when he didn't come home for dinner. When I brought it up, he'd just yell at me. He seemed like a completely different person, and I felt like nothing more than a servant to him. I often found myself in tears, remembering the tough times we went through together to build his business. Now, I felt like I was even lower than his employees. I didn't enjoy housework, but I took it on to support my husband's dream. I'd wanted to keep working as an illustrator, but I gave that up to help him. Any appreciation he once had for my support was now completely gone. To relieve my stress, I would lose myself in my illustrations whenever he was out. Posting them online was my only escape, and I gained more followers. Seeing positive comments lifted my spirits. Among them, I even noticed Bob had left a comment saying, "I hope we can work together again someday." That message kept me going. After we stopped having dinner together, a growing distance came between my husband and me. Eventually, I started to suspect there was another woman. One day, I found a hint of perfume on his jacket, a scent I knew he'd never wear. When I asked him about it, he just shrugged and smirked, saying it probably came from an acquaintance. He acted as if being caught didn't matter at all. For the first time, my sadness turned into anger. I was tired of feeling mocked and left alone at home, doing nothing but housework. The fear of being left behind by the world grew each day, and my friends would only say they were jealous of me when I tried to talk about it. My parents brushed it off as a luxury problem. I felt completely alone in dealing with it. Then one day, my husband came home drunk. I helped him to bed, and that's when I noticed a lipstick mark on his shirt. There was no way he'd come home with a lipstick mark on his shirt by accident. It felt like a challenge from the other woman. Finally, I had proof that he was cheating. The next day, I showed him the shirt and confronted him. "Where were you last night? And what's this lipstick mark?" I asked. He looked at the mark, surprised, but stayed calm. "I was at a bar with friends. It must have happened then." "But for that to happen, you'd have to take off your jacket. Didn't you notice?" I pressed. "I don't remember," he replied, then suddenly stood up and slapped me. I fell back, feeling a hot sting on my cheek, shocked and unable to believe what had just happened. "When will you understand?" he said angrily. "Who do you think is providing for us?" He left the room, and I sat there crying. Watching him go, the reality hit me hard. My husband had changed. He no longer loved me. From then on, he became even more aggressive. If he didn't like a meal I'd made, he'd throw the plate on the floor. "This tastes awful. Do you even know what I like? If you want to stay my wife, improve your cooking," he'd say, getting up to leave. "I'll eat out if this is what you're making. Bad food affects my work." I tried to stop him. "Wait, I want to cook what you like, but you never come home or talk to me. How can I make anything good if I don't know what you want?" He just clicked his tongue in irritation. "Then let's get a divorce. I don't need you. I can live without you, but you can't live without me, can you?" He looked at me with a smirk. "You're worthless, a parasite who doesn't earn a cent." Something inside me snapped. I realized then that the caring, loving husband I once knew was gone. This man would never change. "Then I'll get a job," I said firmly. "What?" My husband looked at me, surprised. "I'll become financially independent too," I replied. He burst out laughing, clutching his stomach. "Who would hire someone as powerless as you?" he scoffed. I held back my anger, knowing I had to stay calm. Getting upset would only lead to more abuse. Since I couldn't fight him physically, I'd have to find another way to stand up for myself. "Fine, do as you please," he said, "but don't slack on the housework. I won't accept you neglecting it just because you're making a few pennies." With that, he left the house. Right away, I began planning. I hired a detective to gather proof of my husband's cheating, and soon I had plenty of photos, images of him with flashy women, drinking and going into hotels with them. It wasn't just one woman either. He was using his money to impress and date different women. Seeing the photos and reading the detective's report, I didn't feel anger or sadness anymore. Instead, I felt relieved that his bold behavior made it easy to gather evidence. 1 week later, I went to a restaurant on the top floor of a hotel to meet with Bob. I wore the nicest clothes I could find, though I still felt underdressed compared to the other customers. I walked to the reserved table, where Bob was already seated. "I'm sorry to keep you waiting," I said. Bob smiled and waved me over. "Not at all, Karen. I've been looking forward to seeing you. Waiting isn't a problem." Bob had been a big supporter of ours when my husband and I started his company, and he was now the president of my husband's parent company. "Thank you so much for helping us when we went independent," I said. Bob nodded. "I was surprised when you both decided to go independent, but since we had worked together for a long time, supporting you was no trouble at all. The company seems to be doing well, thanks to you." His face turned serious. "But today, we're here because you accepted my invitation, right?" he asked, smiling at me warmly. "Yes," I replied, straightening up. Bob had always appreciated my illustrations, and he'd funded the business partly because I was involved. He was also the only one who had advised me against giving up my career to become a homemaker. Bob and I had lost touch over the years, but he found me on social media and left a comment on my posts. We started chatting through emails and texts. "You've always understood my illustrations, haven't you?" I said to him once. "I'm so glad you're still drawing. I'm a fan of your work," he replied. Bob even offered to hire me as an illustrator, though I declined because of my household duties. Still, he kept reaching out, encouraging me to join him. A week ago, after another difficult conversation with my husband, I finally decided to accept Bob's offer. During our meeting, Bob hesitated, then looked at me seriously. "I hate to bring this up, but Michael's company has a really bad reputation," he said. "Really?" I was shocked. Michael had always made it sound like everything was going well. Bob explained, "Since the business started growing, quality has dropped, deadlines are missed, and mistakes keep happening. Worse, Michael doesn't seem to care. Is this widely known?" I asked, surprised. "Yes. As his company grew, people noticed, but now it's the wrong kind of attention. There are even rumors that he's involved with some questionable people." Hearing this, I realized I didn't know my husband as well as I thought. Then Bob changed the subject, smiling to lift the mood. "Anyway, from now on, you'll be doing illustrations for us. No need to outsource, that's a huge plus for our company. And don't worry, we'll make sure it doesn't interfere with your family life," he reassured me. So, I started working for Bob, illustrating remotely from home. I could balance my work with household chores, and it felt amazing to draw for a living again. I had loved doing it as a hobby, but working on commissioned projects was fulfilling in a whole new way. While I was happy, there were times when household responsibilities got in the way, and I found myself wishing I could work freely, without interruptions. But thankfully, my income grew, and I realized that I could support myself if I ever needed to. One day, while I was working, I heard the door slam loudly. I went to see what was going on and found my husband storming toward me, his eyes full of rage. "You traitor," he shouted. At first, I couldn't understand why he was so angry. "I never thought my own wife would take my clients," he fumed. Then I realized, my recent work must have been cutting into his business. Since I started working with Bob, he'd introduced me to other companies, many of which happened to be my husband's business partners. This was, in a way, my silent revenge for how he'd treated me. It must have felt humiliating for him, seeing me, the wife he'd looked down on, taking away his contracts. "You don't have the right to say anything to me," I replied calmly. "I'm just doing my job, just like you said I could." My husband's face grew angrier, but I didn't flinch. "Go ahead, hit me if you want," I said firmly. "But then I'll call the police." The mention of the police made him stop. "My company is failing because of you." "What are you trying to do to me?" he asked, frustrated. "That has nothing to do with me," I replied, walking to another room to grab the divorce papers. I handed them to him and said, "We're not husband and wife anymore." "Are you kidding? You're divorcing me because my company is struggling?" "You're nothing but a gold digger," he sneered. "I could have divorced you a long time ago, but I waited for the right time. Now I'm working, earning my own money, and don't need anything from you." "Wait," he pleaded, suddenly sounding desperate. "Let's talk about our company before we talk about divorce. We started it together, didn't we? You kicked me out of that company, remember? I have nothing to do with it now. But I'll make sure I get the compensation I deserve." He glared at me, biting his lip in frustration. "How greedy can you be? You're asking for money when you're the one asking for a divorce? Do you know how many times you hit me?" I asked quietly. "And how openly you cheated on me?" "I have all the proof I need for compensation." I showed him the photos that the detective had gathered. Seeing the evidence, my husband fell to his knees. "Please," he begged. "The company is already in trouble. I can't handle both a divorce and paying you compensation. I need your support. When the company started going downhill, everyone abandoned me except for you." I ignored his pleas. I left the house with only my work supplies and a change of clothes. The next time I returned was just to pick up the rest of my belongings after the divorce was finalized. By then, his company had lost all its clients, and he was spending his days begging others for help. Meanwhile, I started living on my own, happily making a living from my artwork. My illustrations became popular, and I grew quite successful. Now, I live a good life and always remember to keep my integrity, never letting myself forget my ex-husband as a lesson in what not to become.
I've decided to purchase the luxury car from you, Tiffany. Honestly, an ordinary person like me doesn't need such extravagance, but my parents have been thinking about getting a new car, and it might be just the right fit for them. Since marrying Peter, I've noticed a change in him. He's become more self-centered, even coveting the upscale car my parents gifted to me. Frankly, I've had enough. My name is Tiffany, I'm 28 years old, and I met Peter during our college days. We've been married for 3 years now. Peter is the social butterfly, well-liked by everyone, which is quite the opposite of me. I'm more introverted and have only a handful of close friends. Our relationship started unexpectedly. At first, we bonded over shared courses and study sessions. His interest in me caught me off guard, but when he asked me out, I was so overjoyed that I didn't hesitate to say yes. That was the beginning of our relationship. What drew me to Peter was his charm, his easygoing nature, and his dedication to his studies. He had plenty of friends, many of them attractive and stylish women, so it never felt like he'd struggle to find another girlfriend if he wanted to. In fact, I once asked him nervously if he truly thought I was the right one for him. His reaction was puzzling. He seemed surprised and asked why I'd even asked something like that. I confessed that I often felt insecure and just wanted to understand what made him choose me. After a moment of thought, he simply said that he felt comfortable with me. It wasn't the heartfelt response I had hoped for, and before I could say more, he grew distant, distracted by his phone. Not wanting to start an argument, I dropped the subject and apologized for bringing it up. But the doubts lingered. As time went on, our relationship moved forward smoothly. On the surface, at least. We graduated, got married, and settled into a condo. I found a stable job at a company while Peter continued his graduate studies and part-time work. When I told my mom about our engagement, she was thrilled, though she admitted she and my dad were beginning to worry about when I'd finally introduce a boyfriend. I felt a little guilty for not telling them about Peter sooner, but my mom, understanding my independent nature, was simply happy knowing I had someone in my life who cared about me. My parents have always been my role models. They met in college, just like Peter and me, and have maintained a deep love and respect for each other throughout the years. My dad worked his way up the corporate ladder, while my mom pursued her passion for cooking, eventually teaching culinary classes. They always respected each other's independence and supported each other's dreams, and I hope to create a marriage like theirs. Despite growing up in a well-off family, I've always valued independence. That's why I didn't pursue graduate school like Peter. I wanted to stand on my own and build my own life. My dream has always been simple: to have a family like the one I grew up in, with a strong marriage and perhaps children someday. It may sound straightforward, but for someone like me, it's a significant goal. After Peter and I moved in together, things started to change. Peter was still in graduate school and working part-time, but he didn't contribute much financially. When I gently brought it up, suggesting it would help if he used more of his income for our expenses, he brushed it off, saying, "I do contribute, you know. Didn't you say you'd take care of the living expenses when we moved in together, Tiffany?" His words made me uneasy. Peter had always dreamed of becoming a professor, and that's why he was so focused on his graduate studies. But while he chased his ambitions, I was left feeling like I was carrying most of the financial burden alone. I had reassured Peter not to worry about finances, given my stable job, but when he shot back at me, I could only mumble a weak agreement, unsure of how to respond. Peter let out a heavy sigh. "You wouldn't understand, Tiffany. Being a graduate student is expensive." He paused before adding, "Besides, socializing is part of it too." Then, as if it were an afterthought, he said, "Oh, and I need $1,000 for a research trip. Can you lend it to me? I'll pay you back later." Requests like these became more frequent, and the strain on our relationship grew. He started spending more nights away, leaving me alone with cold, untouched meals and unanswered phone calls. When he finally returned, often in good spirits, I found myself too forgiving. Out of the blue, he'd suggest, "Hey Tiffany, remember you wanted to go somewhere? I have tomorrow off. Let's go." Or he'd compliment my cooking, making me feel momentarily appreciated. Every time Peter showed kindness, I caught glimpses of the happy marriage I longed for. It made me hesitate to confront the deeper issues, even though, deep down, I knew something was wrong. I felt increasingly lonely and anxious, trapped in a cycle of brief moments of joy followed by prolonged periods of solitude. I found myself unable to share these struggles with anyone, especially my parents, who were genuinely thrilled about our marriage. Even so, they must have sensed that something was off. I hadn't visited them in a while, and when I finally did, my dad suggested I stay for dinner. My mom prepared an elaborate meal to welcome me, and during the meal, my dad mentioned that Aunt Lori had recently visited. She wanted to see me, he said, describing her as spontaneous, ambitious, and fiercely independent, the same traits that had always defined her. "I'll reach out to her soon, thanks, Dad," I replied, appreciating their subtle way of encouraging me to reconnect with family. As my dad reminisced about how much Aunt Lori cared for me, he smiled, recalling how she'd playfully teased that Peter had stolen me away, even though she had never intended to marry herself. Before I met Peter, Lori had been more of a confidant than an aunt. I could talk to her about things I couldn't discuss with my parents. She understood me on a deeper level and had always been there to support me, especially in the beginning. I had always been too timid to discuss my relationship with Peter, especially with Lori. But now I felt eager to reconnect. A few days after visiting my parents, I met Lori at a cafe. She was as stylish as ever. As she looked over my outfit, she offered gentle advice. "You know, Tiffany, marriage is just the beginning of a lifelong journey for a woman. You should always feel confident and attractive, no matter what. Your clothes can make a big difference, so don't forget to take care of yourself." With a graceful smile, she took a sip of her tea. Realizing how much I had neglected my own interests, I apologized for not keeping in touch. Lori chuckled and said, "That's so typical of you, Tiffany. It's good to be honest and serious, but being too timid often comes from a lack of experience. Still, I was thrilled when I heard you found someone special." I thought, finally, Tiffany is taking a step forward. It had been ages since I spent time with someone on a day off, and the weather was perfect, making our outing even more refreshing. We settled on the terrace, basking in the warm sunlight. In that tranquil moment, I felt comfortable enough to share my concerns with Lori. At first, I had believed that even someone as reserved as I could make a relationship work with Peter. But lately, doubts had been creeping in. Lori listened attentively, nodding empathetically without interrupting. When I finished, she asked softly, "I suppose you haven't mentioned any of this to your parents, have you, Tiffany?" "No," I admitted. "I even hesitated to tell you today. I didn't want to reveal my vulnerabilities to anyone. I thought I should be able to handle this on my own to prove that I can be truly independent. If Mom and Dad found out, they'd probably want me to move back home right away. I want to try and handle this by myself as much as I can." Lori respected my decision, not pushing the matter further. But she gently assured me, "If you ever need help, let me know first. If my dear Tiffany asks, I'll be there for you, no matter where I am." A month later, my mom called me casually. "When you have time, could you come over? It's nothing urgent." Since I had the next day off, I decided to visit my parents. As I pulled up to my parents' house, I noticed a new car parked in the driveway. Excitement bubbled up inside me. "Dad, is this car new? Did you just get it? Can I take it for a spin?" I joked, my enthusiasm evident as I admired the sleek vehicle. "Don't worry about that," Dad said, smiling warmly. "This car is for you, Tiffany. Use it however you like. It'll come in handy." Mom added softly, "We saw this car in a TV commercial and remembered you said you liked it. So, it's our gift to you. You've been having a tough time lately, and we wanted to cheer you up. If things get rough, just drive this and come home anytime." The SUV, from a renowned international brand, was a thoughtful gesture that filled me with a deep sense of support and freedom. Dad had even arranged a parking spot near my condo for the new SUV. Overwhelmed, I laughed in disbelief, struggling to comprehend the generosity of their gift. Later, as I drove downtown, I reached into my pocket, retrieved the car key, and pressed the button. The SUV's lights flashed brightly around me. It was then that I heard a familiar voice from behind. "What's with the new car?" Peter asked. I turned to see my husband, who hadn't been home for what felt like an eternity. His presence left me momentarily speechless. He looked at the car with a smug grin. "Ah, I see. A gift from your parents?" Every time I faced Peter, I struggled to find my voice, but I was tired of feeling diminished. "Peter, don't you care anymore? Do you even care about me?" I managed to ask, summoning my courage. Peter's response was a bombshell. "Are you just realizing this now? Did you think I loved you all this time? It's ridiculous how hopeful you are." His mocking laughter echoed in my ears. Something inside me snapped. "Then why did you marry me?" I retorted louder than usual. Peter's cold reply was shocking. "Wow, you're going to be that blunt about it. So marrying me was just a means to an end for you, huh? And now you want the car too. It's wasted on you." I couldn't believe the harshness of his words. Peter remained unfazed by the pain he caused. With chilling indifference, he added, "You know, we're getting a divorce. Without me, you'll never find another man. Think about it." With those cruel words, Peter left without a second glance, leaving me feeling both angry and heartbroken. My head pounded with a headache as I sat in the driver's seat, trying to calm myself. Eventually, I reached out to Aunt Lori for advice after a few days of reflecting on the situation. I agreed to the divorce and moved back in with my parents. They welcomed me with open arms, and for a while, life felt peaceful again. However, that peace was short-lived. One afternoon, Peter showed up at my parents' house, accompanied by his parents. They all settled into the living room, and Peter's father spoke in a stern tone. "We're here to discuss our son's divorce," he began. As the conversation about the divorce unfolded, I took a firm stand. "If you don't agree to the divorce," I warned Peter, "I'll use my parents' connections at the university to jeopardize your future. It wouldn't be hard to damage the career of a junior registrar if their daughter files a complaint." Peter, who genuinely cared for me, was taken aback by my approach. He felt my tactics were aggressive and intimidating. as if I was trying to force his hand. His father argued vehemently. "We could easily contest the divorce," he said. "Tiffany, beneath her simple appearance, is manipulative and greedy. Poor Peter. I heard she even paid him to stay away. She must have entertained other men. We should take this to family court and claim Peter was coerced into this divorce." But if Tiffany were to make a genuine apology, maybe things could be different. For instance, if she gave up the car she's been driving, it might help smooth things over. Peter and his parents listened silently, absorbing his father's protests. Just then, the doorbell rang, and my mom answered it. Aunt Lori walked in, appearing behind her. "Sorry I'm late," Lori said, joining the discussion. "How's it going?" Peter's family, who had met Lori only once at my wedding, was taken aback. "What are you doing here?" Peter's mother objected. "It's rude to barge in like this. We're in the middle of something." Lori remained unfazed. "You've heard about Peter's divorce, haven't you? How would an outsider like you know about this?" Peter's mother challenged. Lori continued, "I was informed by my brother earlier. I couldn't miss such an important moment for my dear niece." Peter's mother retorted, "You're probably here to stop the divorce or for money. Are you still going to make accusations after seeing this?" Without missing a beat, Lori pulled out a stack of documents from her bag and laid them out on the table for everyone to see. "I hired a private detective to look into this," she revealed. "It turns out Peter has been cheating on Tiffany with multiple women. He hardly came home because of it, taking advantage of Tiffany's kindness and even asking her for money." The revelation left everyone in stunned silence, and the tone of the meeting shifted dramatically as everyone processed the gravity of Lori's findings. I was deeply immersed in my university research, so when I did make it home, we spent time together sharing meals and going on trips. To the outside world, we appeared like any other married couple. "Say something, Tiffany," Peter pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. "You don't need to defend yourself," his father quickly reassured him. "We'll handle this. It's not your fault." "That's right," Peter's mother added. "These documents from who knows where surely fabricated. Our Peter would never engage in such acts. He's a kind, outstanding son." "Kind to his parents, maybe," Aunt Lori interjected sharply. "But it seems his kindness doesn't extend beyond that." Beneath her calm demeanor, Aunt Lori was resolute. She pulled out a photograph from the stack of documents. "I was at a hotel for a business meeting recently and saw William there with another woman, looking quite cozy. I had the detective look into William as well, and the results were just as I suspected. Do you understand now?" Peter's mother's face went pale as she grabbed the documents and examined them closely. "What is this? William, how long has this been going on? It's all lies, isn't it?" "Kayla, stop looking," William said, trying to snatch the documents from her, but it was too late. Kayla, visibly distraught, confronted William. "You've been cheating on me. The car you wanted so badly was for her, wasn't it?" No matter how much William tried to calm her down, Kayla was inconsolable. She stormed out of the house, tears streaming down her face, with William trailing behind her, desperately trying to explain. In the ensuing chaos, Peter blurted out, "Hey, wait. What about me?" He followed them out, equally confused. The rest of us were left in stunned silence, but Aunt Lori wore a satisfied smile, giving me a knowing wink. It was clear she had anticipated the dramatic turn of events and the revelations that needed to come to light. After the tumultuous events, Aunt Lori shared with me that Peter's parents had eventually divorced. "You won't fall for such a terrible man again," she assured me. "Let's make you even more attractive. I'll teach you everything about grooming and self-care." Despite her busy schedule, Aunt Lori frequently visited, taking me out for meals and shopping trips. During this time, I absorbed a great deal from her, gaining a new perspective on self-care and confidence. A year after the divorce, I made a pivotal decision to attend graduate school. I dedicated myself to my studies and personal development, a period of transformation for me. One day, while at a street intersection, I heard someone call my name. Turning around, I found Peter standing there. "It's been a while. You've changed a lot," he remarked with a hint of surprise in his tone. I barely recognized him at first. To Peter, the woman he once knew as his plain ex-wife had evolved into someone stunningly beautiful and confident. Meanwhile, Peter's life had taken a downturn. Following his parents' public divorce scandal, he had dropped out of graduate school. With his parents, William and Kayla, cutting off financial support due to the chaos he had caused, Peter struggled to pay for tuition and living expenses. The carefree life he once enjoyed was a distant memory. The women who had once shown interest in him had drifted away, and his former glory had vanished almost overnight. As Peter was about to suggest catching up, a man approached us. "Sorry for the wait. Are you a friend of Tiffany's?" he asked. It was Kevin, the man I had recently started seeing. Kevin's arrival was perfectly timed, underscoring the new chapter of my life that Peter was no longer a part of. Nearby, a group of women couldn't help but admire Kevin. "Wow, that guy is handsome. Is he a model?" they commented. Kevin, noticing my brief interaction with Peter, gave him a nod. "He's from my past. It's okay. We're done talking." "Let's go," Kevin said, taking my hand. Peter stood there, stunned, as Kevin confidently led me away. Without giving Peter another thought, Kevin and I walked towards the crosswalk. I kept my gaze straight ahead, focused on the path in front of us and the future that awaited. I didn't look back even once as we left.
After my divorce from Albert was finalized, I started a new chapter in my life by moving in with my daughter Diana. About 8 months into this new life, something unexpected happened. On one of my days off, I was relaxing at home with Diana when I got a surprising phone call from my mother. She told me that Albert and his mother had suddenly shown up at my parents' house without being invited. Feeling worried and curious, I quickly got dressed and rushed over to my parents' house. When I arrived, I was surprised to find Albert and his mother sitting on the living room sofa, apparently waiting for me. Confused about why they were there, I asked, "Why are you here at my parents' house?" Albert's response shocked me. He demanded that I return the money I supposedly owed him. Let me introduce myself. I'm Judy, a 38-year-old office worker. I was married to Albert for 10 years, and we have a daughter, Diana, who is now in the 8th grade. We met on a blind date and connected instantly because of his warm, friendly, and cheerful nature. Our relationship grew from high school sweethearts to life partners, and he proposed after we had dated for a year. Our wedding was a joyful event, attended by my close group of high school friends. We were all deeply involved in each other's lives, celebrating major milestones together. Over time, each friend in our close-knit circle found their partner and got married, creating a tightly bound community of married couples. We were a happy family, and I always believed our home would be a place of love and support. As we grew older, our group of friends transitioned from carefree singles to married adults. Shortly after I announced my pregnancy, it seemed my friends did too. Soon we became a circle of mothers, sharing the joys and challenges of parenting together. It felt like we were all navigating life side by side, and I believed our bond would last forever. I loved being both a wife and a mother, and I was also passionate about my career. After graduating from college, I got a job in the planning and development department of a large company. My days were busy, and the work was demanding but fulfilling. Each day brought new lessons and challenges. One of my friends, who was a stay-at-home mom, once teased me, saying, "You're a workaholic, Judy, but you also manage to keep a wonderful family life. It's almost like you're living 2 lives." She admired my strength, though I often joked that I wished I had the endless energy of a strong man. Both Albert and Diana played important roles in helping me relax after long days at work. When I got home, Diana would greet me with a bright, "Oh, Mommy, welcome home." Her youthful enthusiasm and warm hugs melted away the day's stress. After Diana was born, Albert switched to part-time work at a local cafe, allowing him to take care of her, pick her up from school, and prepare dinner. This arrangement not only supported my career, but also ensured that I came home to a freshly cooked meal, which was a huge relief. Albert's thoughtful cooking helped me unwind and feel refreshed. Evenings at home were a cherished time. Diana and I would often take baths together, chatting about our days and sharing little stories. This simple, everyday interaction brought me immense joy and fulfillment. My life was a beautiful balance of professional success and home life happiness, all made possible by the unwavering support and kindness of Albert and Diana. Their support not only boosted my energy but also deepened my dedication and passion for my work. Together we had created a life that was both rewarding and busy, proving that with the right support, you can have it all. As my career progressed, I began to achieve significant success. I was rewarded with a promotion, which brought more responsibilities. This meant working overtime and often coming home late. By this time, Diana had grown older and understood the demands of my job better, so she was able to manage more on her own. Meanwhile, Albert also increased his hours at the cafe, becoming more involved in the world of coffee. Recently, I started exploring different coffee shops, enjoying their unique beans. Today, I even brought home some coffee beans and cakes from a new bakery I found. I suggested we enjoy them together with some coffee, excited to share this with Albert, who had become passionate about roasting and experimenting with different types of beans at his job. This made the coffee he brewed at home exceptionally good. Albert and Diana were both very supportive of my dedication to my career, but despite their understanding, I began to notice a growing distance within our family. The first sign that something was wrong came when Diana approached me with a concern. "What's up? You wanted to talk about something?" I asked her. "The other day, when I went to see a movie with friends, I saw Dad with another woman," she said, her voice uncertain. I was shocked by her words. Diana continued, "They weren't holding hands or anything, but they seemed quite close. Lately, I've noticed Dad talking a lot on the phone before you get home. Sometimes he's so engrossed that he doesn't listen to me. He looks happy while he's on the phone. At first, I thought he was texting or talking to you. But after seeing him with that woman, I'm starting to wonder if he was talking to her instead." Diana's expression was filled with sadness. Being in middle school, she was very aware and sensitive to such things, and it was clear she was troubled by what she saw. I was equally stunned. The thought that Albert, who I always believed put Diana first, might be involved with someone else was heartbreaking. This revelation required a careful and sensitive approach, as our family's unity was at stake. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I didn't realize we were making you feel this way. I've been too focused on work, haven't I?" I said, feeling guilty as I looked at Diana. "No, it's okay that you work hard, Mom. Don't feel bad about that," Diana reassured me, her maturity in that moment beyond her years. I was touched by her understanding and compassion. "Thank you, Diana," I replied, my heart heavy. "I'll talk to your dad about this. If it turns out he's having an affair, I think I'll have to consider a divorce. Is that okay with you?" She nodded solemnly. "I don't like the idea of Dad having an affair. Just knowing that and still being with him would make me feel bad." Seeing Diana so distressed made me realize just how much I had overlooked our family's needs. Determined to address this issue, especially since Diana had bravely brought it up, I decided to hire a private investigator to look into Albert's activities. The findings were as shocking as they were conclusive. Albert was indeed having an affair, just as Diana suspected, and there was photographic evidence to prove it. What stunned me most was the identity of his affair partner, Tiffany, one of my high school classmates and a fellow member of our mom's group. I was more hurt by the betrayal of my trusted friend, Tiffany, than by Albert's infidelity. Tiffany, a stay-at-home mom and supposedly a loyal friend, was involved with Albert, neglecting her family commitments. When I saw the evidence, I was overwhelmed with emotion. Alone in my room, I was grateful that Diana hadn't walked in on me during this moment. The photos would have only added to her distress. I wasn't ready to confront Albert yet, and I couldn't let Diana see these disturbing images. I took a few deep breaths to calm myself. Shortly after, another friend from our mom's group mentioned she had changed jobs, which gave me an idea. I suggested we all get together, seeing it as the perfect chance to observe Tiffany without revealing that I knew about the affair. The gathering was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I quietly contacted a lawyer and began preparing for a potential divorce, readying myself for the challenges ahead. I gently informed Diana about what I had discovered and told her that her dad and I would likely be getting a divorce. Together, we spent our free time looking for a new apartment, trying to find a place that would represent a fresh start for us both. As the day of the gathering approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. When the day finally arrived, I engaged in casual conversation with my friends, starting by asking about one friend's new job. We all shared updates on our lives, and Tiffany seemed unaware that I knew her secret. During the conversation, she complained about her routine life, saying, "I'm just a housewife stuck in the same routine, unlike all of you who have careers." "You don't have to work because your husband supports you," another friend pointed out. "I do appreciate my husband," Tiffany replied, "but sometimes I feel a little bored." At that moment, I decided to address the elephant in the room. "So is that why you're having an affair with other people's husbands?" I asked, turning directly to Tiffany. The room fell silent, and the casual atmosphere quickly shifted to tension. "Judy, what do you mean by that?" Tiffany stammered, her face turning pale. "It seems that Tiffany is having an affair with my husband, Albert," I said plainly. "What? No way. You must be joking," another friend interjected, trying to defend Tiffany. Tiffany tried to deflect. "That's right, Judy. What are you talking about all of a sudden? You must have confused me with someone else." "Oh, really?" I countered, my voice steady. "Then why don't you all take a look at this?" I reached into my bag, pulled out the photos, and spread them out on the table for everyone to see. The room erupted into gasps of disbelief. "Oh my gosh!" they exclaimed, turning to Tiffany for explanations. Tiffany, clearly caught off guard and unable to deny the evidence in front of her, covered her mouth with her hand. I'm sorry, she began, her voice trembling. I happened to walk into the cafe where your husband works. I didn't know he worked there at first, but then I started going there regularly. My husband provides for me, but he's been neglecting me since we got married. I was feeling lonely, Tiffany continued, tears forming in her eyes. Despite her emotional response and attempts to explain her actions, the betrayal cut deep. An affair, especially with a friend's husband, was a breach of trust that was hard to forgive. Her reasons might explain her actions, but they didn't excuse them. The revelation was painful but necessary, confirming the reality I had begun to suspect and reshaping the dynamics of our friendships and personal lives. Throughout the confrontation, I maintained my composure, unaffected by Tiffany's tears. I'm sorry to everyone else here, but Tiffany, I need to let you know that I will be seeking alimony from you, I announced firmly. I also took a formal step earlier today. I sent a certified letter to your mailbox. Your husband should have already seen it. Tiffany's face fell as she absorbed the seriousness of the situation. Oh no, she murmured, a mix of worry and disbelief in her voice. How could he do something so terrible? She asked, still reeling from the shock. It's far worse to have an affair with a friend's husband, especially when you're married and have a child, I replied, steady and resolute. You need to face the consequences and make amends for your actions. Visibly shaken, Tiffany nodded in acknowledgement. One of my friends chimed in, we really can't trust you anymore, Tiffany. With that, we left the restaurant, leaving Tiffany to deal with the fallout. Once I had dealt with Tiffany, it was time to confront Albert. I was certain Tiffany had already informed Albert about what had happened. When I arrived home, Albert was waiting at the door, panicked. What have you done? I just got a call from Tiffany. Are you making our affair public? How could you be so terrible? He demanded. You acted like a good husband, but you were cheating on me. And it's not just about Tiffany. How could you do that to her family? I retorted. It's ridiculous. It seems people who have affairs think that as long as the other person doesn't find out, it's not a big deal. But what you did was wrong, and it all needs to be revealed as part of your punishment. That's why I'm going to divorce you and seek alimony and child support. Faced with clear evidence of the affair, Albert couldn't deny the truth. He agreed to the divorce, though he was hesitant about the financial implications. However, after I hired a strong lawyer and made it clear I was ready to take the case to court, he finally consented to the financial arrangements. Following the divorce, Albert sold the house we had lived in and moved to a new apartment. I pursued and received alimony from both Albert and Tiffany, totaling $50,000 from each, and I also secured child support from Albert. Once everything was settled, Diana and I began our new life together. Though the ordeal was traumatic, it marked the start of a new chapter where we could seek peace and rebuild our lives. Over time, the emotional wounds from my divorce began to heal. However, about 8 months later, I faced a new challenge. One day, while enjoying a relaxed day at home with Diana, my peace was disrupted by an urgent call from my mother. She informed me that my ex-husband Albert and his mother had unexpectedly shown up at my parents' house and forced their way inside without permission. My father wasn't home at the time, so my concerned mother quickly called me. I hurriedly prepared myself and went over to my parents' house. Upon arriving, I found Albert and his mother sitting nonchalantly on the living room sofa as if they belonged there. Confused and alarmed, I asked, "What are you both doing here at my parents' house all of a sudden?" Albert's response was shocking. He demanded, "I want you to give me back the money you owe me." "Huh? I never borrowed any money from you," I replied, perplexed. He retorted, "I paid $25,000 for our wedding, remember? You were in charge of the wedding, so that money was lent to you. Now that we're divorced, you're claiming it was all a fraud. Honestly, I could sue you for marriage fraud, but for now, all I want is that $25,000 back as a settlement." This unreasonable request took me aback. His mother also chimed in, insisting that I pay him as soon as possible. It became clear that Albert was struggling financially, which might have been driving his irrational demands. He had taken a full-time job at the cafe where he used to work part-time, but the pay was modest. Firmly, I reminded him, we were both equally involved in the wedding, and I paid more of our living expenses than you did. The $25,000 is just a small part of what I contributed. Don't bother me with such unreasonable demands. As the tension escalated, they refused to leave. Just then, my father arrived, having been alerted by my mother. "What are you guys doing here?" he demanded sternly. Albert repeated his claims to my father, who, although usually calm, was visibly furious and shocked by Albert's audacious demands. "It's your fault for having an affair in the first place. If you're going to make such outrageous demands, get out of here," my father asserted, trying to expel them from the house. In a desperate turn, Albert fell to his knees and begged, "Please, Judy, lend me money. Not only are you demanding alimony, but Tiffany's husband is also after me, and I can't afford it. Even $6,000 would help." It was disheartening to see him in such a state. begging for money. However, I responded firmly, "No, I can't do that. Go home." The situation highlighted the deep desperation Albert was experiencing, but it also reaffirmed my resolve to maintain boundaries and protect my family's peace. As the situation with my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law escalated, my father intervened, suggesting he'd handle it. "Fine, I'll get the money. Just wait here," he said calmly and walked to another room. Curious, I followed him. With a mischievous grin, he said, "Well, I have plenty of money. Since we have it, why not give it to them?" He opened the closet and pulled out some cash, creating a sense of suspense. "I wonder how this will play out," I mused silently. My father then put the bills into an envelope and handed it to Albert. With faces lit up with satisfaction, my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law left with the envelope, thinking their plan had worked. As soon as they stepped out, I locked the door behind them and made a quick call to the police. It didn't take long for Albert and his mother to realize the money was fake. They rushed back, pounding on our door in anger. "Hey, what's going on? This is Monopoly money. I don't want this fake cash," Albert shouted, his voice thick with fury. I couldn't help but laugh as I responded through the door. "Since we have so much of it, I thought I'd share it with you." Albert's frustration peaked, and he began banging even harder, now kicking the door with his feet. Their actions only escalated the situation further. As Albert and his mother wreaked havoc on our door, the police arrived and caught them in the act. The scene drew the attention of the neighbors, many of whom witnessed their arrest. In the end, not only did Albert not get any money, but he was also fined for the disturbance and had to cover the damage to our front door. Ironically, one of the bystanders was a regular at the cafe where Albert worked, and word of his antics spread quickly. As a result, Albert lost his job and struggled to find new work. He had to move back in with his parents, and his in-laws ended up covering his alimony and child support payments. To safeguard my family further, I filed a restraining order against my former in-laws, ensuring that any future incidents would lead to an immediate police response. Now life is more peaceful and fulfilling. I'm devoted to working hard and relishing the time watching my daughter, Diana, grow up.
Divorce papers had been duly filed, and when it came to dividing the property, I made the decision to claim the house. Despite my insistence, Ben dismissed any notion that he could contest it. Uttering those final words, he abruptly left the hospital room, indifferent to my pleas for him to wait and my desire for a meaningful conversation. That was how I found myself discarded, even in the midst of battling a serious illness like cancer. Loneliness enveloped me, but strangely, the negative emotions that once lingered in my heart began to dissipate. It was as if my love for Ben had evaporated. At that moment, I acknowledged that Ben, who had insulted me and consistently acted selfishly, deserved some form of retribution. I began calmly strategizing my revenge. My name is Wendy Morgan, a 50-year-old housewife living with my husband Ben. Our marriage, devoid of children, had spanned 30 years. Initially, I believed we were a supportive couple, but an irreparable rift had developed between us. In my understanding of marriage, partners should support, challenge, and complement each other. However, this was absent in our relationship. Returning from an errand, I found Ben demanding dinner immediately, oblivious to the continuous responsibilities of a housewife. Even on his days off, he prioritized his own leisure over supporting me. Over the years, Ben never extended a helping hand, regardless of how busy or unwell I was. His perception of a housewife's role seemed limited to constant labor, and he never allowed me to rest, even during illness. I had hoped for a marriage built on mutual support, but Ben's actions contradicted that ideal. The early days saw me attempting to bridge the gap, but Ben remained resolute, asserting his belief that as a housewife, I had no grounds to complain. Love had long faded, and I didn't anticipate unwavering support in everything. Still, I longed for simple kindness during challenging days. Ben's refusal to acknowledge my humanity and hardships widened the rift between us, turning our marriage joyless and meaningless. I grasped the situation more acutely than anyone else. It was during this realization that I sensed something awry with my health. While I had always been prone to illness, this time felt distinctly different. I promptly reached out to my father, who escorted me to the hospital, where I received the diagnosis of cancer. Fortunately, it was detected early, and the doctor assured me that I could commence treatment immediately. Eager to begin the healing process, I implored my father to bring only the essentials from home. Hastily, I navigated through the hospital admission procedures. Unable to meet Ben that day due to his work commitments, I conveyed the disquieting news to him through a brief message. I informed him, "Cancer has been found, and I'm being hospitalized for treatment immediately." In these moments of anxiety about the uncertain future, Ben's image crept into my thoughts. Despite my belief that my love for him had waned, a latent desire to face him properly and continue our life together as a couple lingered deep within my heart. Even though Ben had consistently been aloof and indifferent, I envisioned a scenario where, now that I was weakened, he might express concern and ask, "Are you okay?" I yearned for some warm words and would have been content with just one visit. I wondered if he struggled with meals and household chores in my absence. I felt remorse for not being able to fulfill the household duties I had always taken for granted. However, as days passed in the hospital, Ben never visited. He had read my message, and yet there was no expression of concern, not even a simple reply acknowledging the situation. His apparent indifference despite my serious illness shook me to the core, causing profound pain. Realizing the futility of my expectations, I decided to stop anticipating anything from Ben. With this newfound mindset, I faced the grueling battle against the illness. The treatment was as demanding as expected, marked by enduring pain and suffering. The medication's side effects took a toll on my body, leading to many sleepless nights filled with discomfort. There were moments when I contemplated giving up on treatment, allowing my deteriorating body to take its course and end my life. However, each time I felt this way, the encouraging words from my parents, reassuring me that I was doing great and things would surely get better, compelled me to summon strength and endure until today. Then, on a day when I was particularly unwell, lying in bed and staring blankly at the ceiling, the door to my room unexpectedly swung open. It wasn't the day for my parents to visit, and I couldn't help but wonder who had entered. The identity of the visitor became clear as I shifted my gaze and saw Ben standing there. Had he finally come to visit me, genuinely concerned about my condition? As he looked at my emaciated face with hollow cheeks, a whirlwind of emotions left me speechless. Would he come to dislike me even more? Without displaying any concern for my state, Ben sat on a chair next to the bed, stared at me, and laughed. "So this is how bad one can look with cancer, huh? You don't even look like a woman anymore." His words made me feel as if the blood had drained from my face. These were words that should never be said to someone fighting cancer. I didn't want him to say anything more, but unaware of my feelings, Ben continued with even more hurtful words. "Ever since you've been hospitalized and not at home, every day has been like heaven. The house is a mess, but I don't even have to go back there. Life is so comfortable without you." His heartless words reopened my wounds. Why must I be subjected to such cruel words? Why is there not a single word of concern from him? Although I wanted to vehemently criticize Ben, my weakened body couldn't move as I wished, and all I could do was silently accept his brutal words. I looked at Ben with a vacant gaze, and noticing my stare, he laughed condescendingly. Then, suddenly saying, "Oh yeah, by the way," he uttered unbelievable words. "Oh yeah, by the way, I've already filed the divorce papers. I'll be taking the house. As for the property division, you hardly have any right to refuse." The moment I heard those words, my vision blurred and twisted. Did he file the divorce papers without even consulting me? Why? As I was at a loss for words, Ben continued to speak. "I've really fallen for someone. She's 20 years younger, but I'm serious about her. I plan to be with her, so you're in the way." The realization that he was having an affair raced through my mind. However, then, having said what he wanted to, began preparing to leave. Wait a minute. Even as I said that, Ben paid no attention. There was clearly no love left for me in his heart. The realization was so painful that it didn't matter anymore. I see. Understood. I said this, and Ben left the hospital room with a pleased laugh. After that, I endured my treatment with even more determination than before. Despite the hardships, I focused my will, resolved to completely cure my cancer and regain my health. 2 days passed like this. It might sound short, but for me, unable to sleep properly at night, those 2 days felt very long. I wondered if the divorce Ben mentioned really happened, or if he had said it just to unnerve me. The uncertainty was unbearable, but somehow I managed to continue my treatment. In fact, I had a trump card to completely bring down Ben. Even Ben, who seemed almost inhuman, would be thrown into chaos once he realized it. If panicked, he would surely try to contact me in some way. While waiting with this thought, Ben's call came in. Thinking it improper to answer in the hospital room, I pretended not to notice. But Ben persistently kept calling, even on silent mode. The continuous calls were too annoying. I'm in the hospital room, and it's inconvenient to have my phone ringing, so please don't call. After sending this message, the calls finally stopped. But then came texts like, "Please let me talk to you just once. Please, I was wrong about everything. I'll apologize properly." Apparently, he had resorted to messaging since I wasn't answering his calls. All of his words seemed like self-defense. Probably, Ben realized why I accepted the divorce so easily. Can I come over there now? Faced with my silence, Ben seemed to have reached his limit and sent that message. Honestly, facing Ben now amidst my grueling battle with illness felt like nothing but pain. But if I refused, he would probably keep calling. So I replied, "Do as you like." My revenge was about to begin. Ben, who had unjustly treated me for so long and divorced without consent, deserved a severe punishment that would make him despise his life. I had been eagerly anticipating the moment when I could bring him down to the depths of despair. "Hey, what the hell is this all about?" Ben entered the room with a shout, his tone suggesting a palpable sense of panic. To an outsider, it might seem like he was overreacting, but given the circumstances, it was natural for Ben to be agitated. After all, I had been concealing an incredibly important secret, and the critical moment had arrived. "I had no idea that you had assets worth $10 million. Why didn't you tell me how much you had?" Ben spoke, placing my passbook on the desk, clearly displaying a deposit of over $10 million. I never mentioned it because you never asked. How could I imagine a housewife like you having so much money? If I knew you had this much, I wouldn't have divorced. That's not my problem. It's Ben's fault for divorcing me without proper confirmation. Stop with the pointless excuses. Despite his domineering behavior and divorcing me without my consent, Ben couldn't stop his selfish remarks upon discovering my assets. "Why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't have divorced you if I knew." I decided to reveal the truth to the selfish Ben. The truth is, I accumulated this fortune of over $10 million through investments. I started to fill my spare time, and it was my parents who suggested, "Why don't you try investing?" Our family life was comfortable even on Ben's salary alone, but I wanted to contribute to our finances in some way. My father, knowledgeable about investments, immediately taught me diligently when I expressed interest. Thanks to his guidance, I started with the hope of making even a small profit and continued investing steadily. I made my first investment 5 years ago, and since then, I rapidly improved, becoming capable of earning significant amounts of money through investments. Even my father was astonished, saying, "I never expected you to grow this much." The profits I generated over these 5 years are the $10 million recorded in the passbook Ben brought. Actually, I was planning to tell you when the timing was right, but then I got cancer. You divorced me without listening to anything I had to say. I never intended to keep this wealth a secret forever. Once I overcame my battle with cancer and could return to my normal life, I planned to tell Ben about this $10 million. I had originally intended to share it with him, envisioning that we could continue our life as a couple and use it when necessary. However, Ben selfishly chose to divorce before I could reveal this financial secret. Now that we're strangers, it feels odd to disclose it to him. Given this outcome, the entire $10 million probably belongs to me. As I recounted my story, Ben's face flushed, and he began shouting, "If I knew you had this much money, I wouldn't have divorced you. It's your fault for keeping it a secret, so pay me $10 million in the property division. You need to atone for the sin of keeping secrets from your husband." Whether he was panicking over the reality of such a vast fortune or frustrated that he couldn't get his hands on it, Ben started saying the unthinkable. Since we were already divorced, no matter what, it was impossible to give him this $10 million. Still, Ben, seeing but unable to reach the $1 million right before him, started making unrealistic demands. In response, I unintentionally laughed. Ben yelled at me, "What are you laughing at? Stop belittling me. I've always been annoyed by your attitude. I never thought you'd be so cunning to have such a fortune as a wife. A wife's assets belong to her husband. You have to give me this $10 million. I never intended to keep this secret forever. I was planning to tell you, but you divorced me first. Stop making excuses. It's all your fault for keeping secrets." Without any recollection of making excuses, Ben became more enraged with each word I spoke, blaming and berating me. His shouting was too much for my head, still recovering from illness, and I couldn't bear it. Realizing it was futile to continue talking with Ben, who wouldn't accept my words and would surely try to make me the villain, I quickly ended it. "Enough is enough. You divorced me of your own accord, right? Who filed the divorce papers without my consent? I always thought your behavior was terrible, but I never imagined you could be so cruel. To think a person could feel this much frustration." Now my heart was filled not with the pain of battling cancer, but with resentment towards Ben. He should have realized that shouting this loudly would affect my weakened body. More than that, I couldn't suppress my anger towards this selfish person who sat arrogantly beside my bed, accusing me with words born from his self-centered thoughts. Do you know what I thought when I found out I had cancer? I thought that answering him might make Ben worry about me a little, be kinder to me, and reconsider his feelings. Instead, he didn't even come to visit me in the hospital. When he finally showed up, he told me he had filed for divorce without my consent and that he would take the house. How could he be so selfish and then come here criticizing me for having substantial assets? I've said it many times, I never intended to keep it a secret forever. I was planning to find the right time to tell you. You destroyed that chance with your own hands. I had never blamed Ben this much before. I had always forgiven his selfish behavior, thinking we were a couple who should support each other. I never scolded or reprimanded him, always enduring for his sake. But the reason I could endure and keep going was that I had love for Ben. I truly loved him. But now, I don't have any love left for him. All I feel is uncontrollable anger and disbelief towards Ben, who only speaks selfishly. How can someone be so self-centered? What kind of upbringing leads to such a lack of empathy? After all, a person who indulges in an affair and divorces without consent can't possibly have serious thoughts. I was too stunned to speak, realizing it was futile to harbor any doubts. "Please, my girlfriend found out you have $10 million and says she'll divorce me if I don't get it from you. If I don't get this money, I'll be all alone. You still love me, right? Don't you want to help the person you love?" So Ben's mistress also knows about my $10 million fortune. He must have carelessly told her. From Ben's story, it seems his mistress is also quite obsessed with money. Birds of a feather flock together, I guess. As much as Ben and his mistress seem to be a match, I couldn't care less about him. No matter how much suffering comes his way, it has nothing to do with me anymore. Please, I'll do anything. Just give me the $10 million. Otherwise, I'll suffer. Please help me. I had never seen Ben so desperate, and his expression seemed so ridiculous that I couldn't help but laugh. At the same time, I felt disappointed and miserable, realizing he had never been this desperate about anything related to me. The more we talked, the colder my feelings for Ben became. I realized that talking to him anymore was pointless. No more dealing with this rotten man could possibly lead to my happiness. I felt foolish for suffering and hoping during my illness that he might come and speak kindly to me one day. Oblivious to my feelings, Ben continued to plead. "Please, I'm begging you. Help me." But I couldn't bear to hear his words any longer. "Please leave now," I said. Ben started to plead with a look of desperation. Even that was noisy and unpleasant to me. I pressed the nurse call button, explained the situation, and asked the nurse to get rid of Ben. A security guard came and forcibly removed him from the room. "Please listen to me. I need you," he shouted until the moment he was thrown out. But I no longer accepted any of his words. Afterwards, he visited the hospital many times, but the nurses, knowing the situation, never let him near my room again. According to a friend, Ben, unable to get the $10 million, disappointed his mistress and was promptly divorced. Now left alone, as for me, I continued to confront my cancer with determination and finally recovered and was discharged. The relief of overcoming my difficult battle with cancer and the newfound energy I felt were more precious than anything. Now I'm living a peaceful and relaxed life, gradually using the assets I grew through investments. "This is where my parents live," Mark declared suddenly upon his visit. Behind him, his in-laws nodded happily. I found myself in the middle of an online meeting and quickly apologized to the other party before ending the call. Irritated, I turned my gaze towards the door. "Why did you come all of a sudden?" I asked them, maintaining my composure. My father-in-law proudly replied, "We'll pay off the mortgage, so please leave." It was hard to suppress a laugh at his statement. My mother-in-law had never worked, and my father-in-law was just staying at home without any employment. Yet Mark was completely in favor of his parents' opinion. Disappointed by his stance, I considered divorce. "I leave," I quickly replied, to the surprise of all three of them. "The mortgage of the house is $5,000 per month." With an inward smile, I began to pack seriously. Luckily, I had a business trip scheduled for a week starting for the next day. With my suitcase and bank book ready, I headed to the entrance. "Goodbye," I said as I left the house. First, I'd start by transferring the house's title to Mark. I felt excited thinking about my future plans. My name is Shyle Owen. I am 47 years old and work as a web designer. I went independent 5 years ago and have been fortunate enough to receive many project checks. As a result, I've earned more than 5 times my previous salary and now live on the top floor of a high-rise condo. I met Mark, my husband, 3 years ago through Ashley, my former boss and his cousin. He's kind and honest, but had trouble maintaining relationships, so he had been single for a long time. Around that time, my business was doing well, and I bought the top floor of a high-rise condo, doubling as an office. I wasn't planning on marrying, but Ashley strongly suggested I meet Mark. When I met him, he was very gentle and attractive, looking much younger than his actual age. We started dating and got engaged within 6 months. My parents had already passed away, and my only relative was my brother. So my brother and his wife also attended the family meeting. From Mark's side, his parents and cousin Ashley came. The meeting went smoothly overall. However, my sister-in-law's comment, "This seems stiff," left me puzzled. I never imagined her words would become a reality. After marrying, Mark moved into my house, and we started our life together. His workplace was harsh, requiring him to leave early in the morning and return home past midnight. Despite this, his salary was only a quarter of mine. I suggested to Mark, who was exhausted and went to sleep immediately every day, "It's bad for your health. Why don't you look for another job?" However, he reprimanded me with a face full of anger. "Are you saying I should quit my job? Are you looking down on me because I earn less?" I was surprised by Mark's strong reaction, as we had never argued before. Feeling uncomfortable about unintentionally disrespecting his job, I decided to apologize sincerely. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way. I'm just worried about your health." Mark quickly calmed down and apologized. Our first argument ended swiftly. However, it became difficult to suggest a job change afterward. Mark's return time got even later, and he eventually spent half the week at the office. While I was concerned about his health, he seemed to enjoy his job. So I decided to support him as much as I could, creating a relaxing environment whenever he returned home. "Hey, about my dad's medical expenses, could we increase the remittance a bit?" Mark suggested this when his father was in the hospital with back pain. Sighing inwardly at his request in his father's hospital room, I didn't hesitate to help my in-laws, as I had no parents of my own. Our household depended on my income, with Mark contributing a part of his salary to his parents. His salary wasn't low for a man in his 40s, but the exact amount he kept for himself was unclear. However, it was evident he was providing enough for his parents not to struggle. I couldn't agree when he insisted on increasing the remittance because it was possible only due to my income. Yet it was hard to refuse in front of his parents. "Mark, you're really kind. Thank you so much. It's a big help," they said, looking at me and Mark under their pressure. I reluctantly agreed to increase the remittance. Afterward, my in-laws started demanding money for various reasons, not just the remittance. I wanted to refuse, but they knew I would say no, so they approached Mark instead. Especially weak to his mother's requests, Mark often decided to increase the remittance whenever she asked. On the day his father returned from the hospital, after sending my in-laws off in a taxi, Mark and I returned home, only to find surprisingly that his parents, who were supposed to have gone home, were waiting outside our house. It's tough for Dad to climb our stairs, so I thought we'd take care of him here until his back is fully healed. "What? You can't just spring that on me." My surprised reaction made my mother-in-law frown. My father-in-law stood in front of the door as if to say, "Let us in quickly, Mark." "That's okay, right?" Mark replied, and I stared at him in shock. He avoided my gaze from his reaction. As I observed the situation, it became apparent that Mark and his parents had likely already discussed their plans. "Fine, you can stay here until you're fully recovered." I reluctantly relented, ushering my in-laws inside. They surveyed the house and settled onto the living room sofa. "Look at this place, so nice. Our house is 50 years old and falling apart," remarked my father-in-law. "Yeah, it's really showing its age," agreed my mother-in-law. Mark nodded along, indicating their intention to stay for an extended period. Admittedly, since I had been providing them with financial support, having them here might ease the burden. However, financial considerations aside, it didn't mean I welcomed the idea of cohabiting. Renovating old houses is trendy these days. How about considering that, Mark? I suggested. "Yeah, maybe," Mark replied vaguely. 2 years into our marriage, despite being in the supposed honeymoon phase, Mark and I hardly spent time together. We hadn't even gone on a honeymoon. This place served as both my home and office. It was manageable when Mark was out for work, but with my in-laws around all day, it complicated things. If we were to live together, I'd rather move into their house and reserve this place solely as an office. Thanks to my initial resistance, the topic of cohabitation wasn't brought up again by my in-laws. However, even months after my father-in-law's discharge from the hospital, my mother-in-law showed no sign of taking him back. Their belongings started to overflow from the guest room into the living room. "Mark, your dad seems perfectly healthy now. He even went bowling today. Maybe it's time for them to go home," I suggested. "What are you saying? Sending my dad back with his bad back is cruel. What if it gets worse?" Mark raised his voice, leaving me silent. It seemed that Mark believed raising his voice would compel compliance. He frequently asserted his opinions loudly, and opposing him often resulted in my mother-in-law siding with him, putting me at a disadvantage. This dynamic persisted for 2 years. During this time, I took care of all the housework while my in-laws frequently went out to enjoy themselves. Despite my father-in-law's back being fully healed, there were no signs of them returning home. "Sorry, I have a meeting at 1 p.m. today, so I'll eat lunch in my room, okay?" I informed them as I placed lunch on the table. "Understood, but leave the dishes for later," my mother-in-law replied without looking up. As the clock struck 1 p.m., my online meeting commenced. However, about 10 minutes in, the door burst open, and Mark declared, "This is where me and my parents live." My in-laws nodded behind him. I swiftly apologized to the meeting participants and ended the call, inwardly frustrated. "I told you I had a meeting at 1 p.m., I grumbled as I headed towards the door. "Why are you doing this all of a sudden?" I asked calmly, only to be met with my father-in-law's smug reply, "We'll pay the mortgage so you can leave." Suppressing a laugh at his audacity, I simply replied, "All right, I'll leave," surprising all three of them. With the mortgage at $5,000 per month, I couldn't help but smile inwardly at the prospect of moving forward with my plans. I approached the task with a solemn expression, aware of the serious decision I was making. Fortunately, a week-long business trip awaited me starting the next day. Armed with a meticulously packed suitcase and my bank book, I headed for the exit. "Goodbye," I uttered, bidding farewell to the home that had become a source of contention. The first order of business was transferring the house title to Mark. Brimming with excitement about the impending changes, I checked into a hotel and promptly contacted a real estate agent to initiate the house transfer, encompassing the mortgage. The success of the transfer rested on Mark's ability to handle the mortgage. If he couldn't manage it, the options were a lump sum payment or selling the house. Accepting this reality, I directed the agent to find me a new home and office. My work could be conducted remotely, but a dedicated office space was crucial for calm client discussions. The agent identified a suitable location approximately 40 minutes from my previous residence, complete with top-notch security. After a visit and quick decision, I bought the luxurious apartment, considering it a well-deserved reward for my efforts. In the interim period before the move, I stayed in temporary accommodation. Once all the necessary documents were prepared, I delegated the packing and moving process to a professional moving company. During the move, my in-laws and Mark assisted while exchanging unpleasant remarks about me. One of the movers even commented, "You have a difficult family," causing a flush of embarrassment. A week after settling into my new abode, I received a call from Mark. His anxious inquiry about changing the mortgage indicated he was just grasping the situation. His father's shouts in the background urged me to return quickly. Despite the divorce being the plan, Mark seemed taken aback. "But we're getting a divorce, right? It's unfair for me to pay the mortgage if you're the ones living there," he protested. However, I couldn't accept his denial after they had explicitly told me to leave the house. I played back our conversation from that day, caught on tape during a web meeting. Mark was startled by my explanation, having forgotten about my practice of recording meetings for documentation purposes. Undeterred, I informed him about the impending mortgage repayments, subject to a credit check. Mark, seemingly unaware of the details, asked about the monthly amount, leading to my laughter. Despite my prior disclosures and document presentations, Mark seemed oblivious to the $5,000 monthly mortgage. Stunned, he remained speechless, prompting his mother to intervene. She questioned the amount and proceeded to assert that Mark's salary could handle it. Unbeknownst to his parents, Mark hadn't disclosed his actual salary, allowing his mother to confidently declare that they wouldn't assist me any longer. In response, I burst into laughter, provoking her anger. Undeterred, I revealed the actual mortgage amount, $4,000. "What? The mortgage is Mark's monthly salary. That's absurd." My words left her shocked and frozen for a moment, but then she burst into laughter. "That's impossible. Mark has been sending us $4,000 every month. If his salary is really $4,000, he would have been sending us all of it. Stop lying," she exclaimed, refusing to believe me. Remaining calm, I pointed her towards the evidence. Look at the shelf right by the entrance of the living room. You'll find Mark's salary slips there. If you doubt it, check for yourself. She dismissed my explanation, accusing me of lying, and headed to the indicated shelf. In the background, I could hear Mark trying to stop her. Soon, her voice of surprise came through the phone. What? There's not even $4,000 here, Mark. What's the meaning of this? Mark's actual salary turned out to be even lower than I knew, and I could hear his in-laws questioning him in the background. You might not hear me, but just so you know, the house mortgage is $5,000 a month. Take care, I declared as loudly as possible. Whether they heard me or not, I ended the call. Mark called again several times later, but I ignored them all. Let's discuss this through a lawyer from now on, I texted him, and then ignored any further communication. The lawyer I hired dealt with frequent contacts in the following days, which soon quieted down. I promptly filed for compensation through my lawyer. After a while, a response came through my lawyer, and I couldn't help but laugh at its contents. It seemed to be co-authored by a team of liars from Mark's side. Their claims were laughable. The allegations by Shelley are false, and the real victim is our client. We demand compensation for emotional distress, it read. All I could say to my lawyer was, I'm sorry. The divorce was nearing, but our relationship as a couple was still ongoing. I wanted to get away from a husband who could make such demands. My client wants to meet and discuss in person. It seems Mark doesn't know about this, my lawyer said, handing me a letter. The letter briefly requested to verify the truth behind Mark's claims. I agreed through my lawyer and chose a location far from my current residence for precaution. At the scheduled meeting with the opposing lawyer, Mark didn't show up. The lawyer was young and polite, greeting me properly upon arrival. He revealed that his client was actually Mark's mother. According to him, Mark remained silent during their discussions, keeping his head down. His parents kept accusing me, claiming I fabricated fault to demand compensation. As I listened, the lawyer handed me a document detailing the alleged malicious actions. However, my lawyer and I noticed that the document was intentionally crafted to demean me. I explained each point in detail, and the opposing lawyer nodded earnestly, showing understanding. My lawyer presented evidence in line with my explanations. I see the content of your statements is completely different, Shelley. You have solid evidence and a strong case, he commented. Oh, this part is reversed. I pointed out and corrected a mistake. The opposing lawyer was visibly shocked. Once the explanation concluded, he left the room with the same politeness as when he arrived. My lawyer and I strategized to expose Mark and his parents' falsehoods, reaching out to other relevant parties to set up a meeting to discuss compensation. About a month after the meeting with the opposing lawyer, Mark and his parents arrived looking haggard. His mother glared at me as if seeing an enemy. You seem to be enjoying all this trouble. Who do you think is responsible for this situation? She asked, dissatisfied with the private dining room I had chosen. It was unfortunate that she didn't like the upscale restaurant she used to favor. However, her irritation might also be influenced by the fact that the opposing lawyer, having learned the truth, dropped their defense. Mother, you used to like this place, right? I anticipated her delight, but she met my words with a somber expression. We entered the restaurant, greeted by staff, briefed on our situation, and escorted to a private room. Mark remained silent until we were seated, then suddenly grew emotional. Shelley, I was wrong. Please help me. I can't go on like this. I'll do anything you say. Please come back, Mark pleaded, stunning his parents. I offered a kind smile, momentarily easing Mark's distress. However, I signaled my lawyer, who handed Mark a document. As Mark paled, I urged him to read it. His mother snatched it, glaring furiously. The document meticulously refuted each of Mark's claims in stark red ink. Enraged, she splashed water on my face, berating me for my arrogance. To everyone's surprise, I burst into laughter at the absurdity of the situation. My laughter caught them off guard, including my lawyer. Yes, it seems I wasn't the perfect wife, I quipped. I shared the burden of household chores, endured criticism for my infertility, and even had my earnings taken. As Mark's parents continued to rail against me, I signaled my lawyer, who produced a photograph. It depicted Mark entering a hotel with a young woman, my former boss and Mark's cousin Ashley. Shocked into silence, Mark couldn't deny the evidence. Ashley explained the situation, revealing Mark's infidelity. In the face of his guilt, I submitted the divorce papers and compensation documents. Mark, overwhelmed, began to cry. His parents, equally shocked, faced the reality of their son's actions. Within a month, Ashley informed me that Mark and his parents had moved due to financial strain. Mark's salary couldn't sustain their spending habits, and they sought rent assistance. The compensation for the deceived woman and myself was covered by Ashley's parents. Surprisingly, Ashley found love with Mark's former lawyer, drawn to his decisiveness. Embracing the unexpected turn of events, I started blogging about my experiences, leading to new writing opportunities. Since the divorce, I've been pursued by a corporate executive I met through business. Our relationship turned romantic, and he's proposed we live together. While I contemplate my answer, I'm certain of my decision. As I prepare for our date tomorrow, I reflect on the journey that brought me here, seated in front of my computer once again. Now residing with my parents, the realization hit me hard. My marriage, once believed to bring happiness, had only been a facade. My husband, whom I trusted, turned out to be using me, and I felt betrayed by my in-laws. The mother and son duo, oblivious to their own naivety, seemed oblivious to the practicalities of life. Faced with the threat of being kicked out, I questioned the essence of being a family with such people. The decision was clear. I needed to take charge. Swiftly reaching out to everyone, I initiated preparations for the next chapter of my life. As for the household items, I arranged for a service to pick them up. The following day, furniture and appliances were taken away, prompting a panicked response from my husband. I am Michelle Thompson, a 35-year-old woman who has been working from home since college. Despite a monthly commute, I am a full-time employee, thanks to the accommodating nature of my company. A motorcycle accident during my college years left my legs disabled, confining me to a wheelchair. Despite ongoing rehabilitation efforts, the prospect of improvement remained bleak. Embracing my condition, I had initially resigned to the idea of lifelong singleness. However, a blind date arranged by friends reintroduced the desire for companionship. I met Ken, my now husband, who, despite being 5 years my senior, exuded youthful energy. His straightforward demeanor, though bordering on rudeness, intrigued me. Ken's genuine curiosity about my life in a wheelchair set him apart, and I appreciated his unfiltered interest. Despite societal norms, his bold inquiries made me feel seen and understood. As we continued dating, I convinced myself that happiness awaited me with Ken. Blinded by the prospect of a lasting connection, I eagerly accepted his proposal after just 6 months of dating. Immediately after our marriage, things took an unexpected turn. Ken and I decided to move into my standalone house, which, despite being a rental, was relatively pricey but exceptionally wheelchair-friendly. It seemed the previous tenant had made the place more accessible, and Ken appreciated the spaciousness. Since I spent a lot of time at home, I naturally took on most of the housework. Occasionally, when I asked Ken for help, he would dismissively claim exhaustion, refusing to lift a finger or assist me in the bath. Despite managing on my own, bathing took longer, and I reminisced about the days when a caregiver visited twice a week to help. Frustrations mounted as Ken neglected to put away bath items, making the process even more time-consuming. Pleas for understanding fell on deaf ears, as Ken failed to recognize the house's design catered to my needs. It became evident that Ken's initial attraction had been to the house, appliances, and my ability to handle chores despite my disability. His unemployment and nightly partying further strained our relationship. While the realization was heart-wrenching, I clung to the notion that our marriage must have some love to it. Financial issues crept in, with Ken increasingly relying on me for money. Seeking advice from his mother only brought biased support, leaving me feeling lost without any family to turn to. Friends dismissed my concerns, emphasizing Ken's facade. Ken's unpredictable behavior, fueled by alcohol, pushed me to my limits. I grappled with the dilemma of enduring the situation or facing a solitary future. Just as the idea of divorce started to gain prominence, Ken unexpectedly proposed living with his parents. Stunned, I learned he intended for them to move into our place. While I understood the desire to be near aging parents, their good health made the proposition perplexing. I couldn't comprehend why Ken's parents were considering moving from their own home to ours. Did they genuinely need to stay here? With 4 people in the house, it would be cramped, and given that I work from home, it would be quite inconvenient. You're always thinking about yourself, huh? I never thought you were this selfish, Ken accused. I'm just questioning why they need to move here when they have their own place. Our home is more spacious, modern, and equipped with all the conveniences. Besides, it's designed to be accessible for elders. If Ken's parents move in, I'd have to be on my toes during work hours. While Ken is rarely home, his retired parents would likely be around a lot. Sharing the bathroom and kitchen? I'm slower than most people, and I can foresee the challenges of such a living situation. Can I have some time to think? You better hurry up. We don't have much time, Ken retorted. Despite his claim of limited time, Ken wasted no time. By the weekend, he brought his parents over, making me suspect they had been planning this move for a while. You know, I've been thinking. Maybe you should consider a facility, Ken's mother suggested. What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A facility for me? Yeah, it's a good idea, right? You have your own limits. In a facility, they take care of everything. It became apparent that Ken wasn't just contemplating his parents moving in. He was also considering sending me away. I'd visit you from time to time. That statement jolted me awake. If not now, then when, Ken? What am I to you? Your wife, right? Would you really tell your beloved wife to go to a facility? Hold on. When did I say I love you, Michelle? Ken's words flushed my face with anger. This guy, Ken, was using me. Wasn't it my fault for letting it get to this point? I thought I had to draw a line. Then, even more shocking words came out of Ken's mouth. In this house, I'm going to live with my parents. You, an outsider, can go live in some cheap facility. What'd you just say? I looked to his parents, hoping for support, but they just had eerie grins on their faces. Why are you laughing? What's the big deal, huh? Were they targeting my home even before our marriage? Things have been escalating too fast lately. I need to evict these people. Please leave. What? Leave now? How can you talk to my parents like that? I felt like I saw the real Ken. He was yelling at me with such fury. If he cares so much for his parents, why doesn't he earn his own money and build them a house? Why does he have to take mine? My head felt like it was on fire. It's okay, Ken. Michelle must have been shocked since we came unexpectedly, his mother said. We just came to check the place today. Yeah, we need to check before moving in. Looks like there are more appliances than last time. Seems comfy to live in. They were genuinely here to take over my home. In an attempt to steady my nerves, I took a deep breath, inhaling oxygen. A sudden question lingered in my mind. If I leave, how are they planning to sustain themselves? His parents rely on a pension, and Ken is just a part-timer. I'm covering all the rent and living expenses. Who's going to handle the $2,800 monthly payment? Do his parents assume Ken is covering the living expenses? Disregarding my concerns, his parents cheerfully departed, with Ken following suit. I'm going to stay at my parents' tonight. Hold on, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. I, the man of the house, have decided. I won't change my mind. Left alone in shock, I couldn't linger in that state. I promptly contacted a real estate agent I knew. When Ken returned the next day, he saw the organized belongings and chuckled. Oh, started packing. Found a place to move to already? Yes, I have. Ken appeared genuinely surprised by my swift response. And here's the card of a divorce lawyer. Here you go, Ken. From now on, let's communicate through the lawyer. A divorce? Why? If you're kicking me out, there's no point in being married anymore, right? Ken looked as if he had been hit by a ton of bricks. He hadn't anticipated my swift mention of divorce. You can't live without me, right? I don't understand what you mean. Who else would marry you? I can live on my own, but you said you wanted to get married. It was at this moment that I realized how arrogant and overconfident Ken had been. He approached me assuming I was a lonely, disabled single woman. I'm independent, have money, and never struggle with my living. Plus, I stay home all the time, so I handle all the chores for him. I'm the ideal woman. Money keeps coming in even if he doesn't work. He thought I wouldn't leave because I couldn't find anyone else. That's why he was shocked when I casually brought up divorce. Why? You know, if you divorce me, you might be single for the rest of your life. Well, if it means living a married life with you, I'd rather be single forever. Whether I spend the rest of my life alone isn't for you to decide. The typically submissive me was now fighting back, and he was getting flustered. I could tell that Ken was panicking. I never thought he was such a weak man. I don't know why I had been putting up with him for so long. Once I decided on the divorce, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. I guess I had been too focused on getting married. Anyway, you don't have to move out right away. I didn't mean to rush you into a facility that soon. Oh, it's fine. I'll do as you wish. Don't worry. You won't find a place that fast. Think it over, okay? I've already secured a place, so it's all right. What? Wait a minute. Isn't this too soon? Observing Ken's shifting attitudes, from smugness to panic, only heightened my irritation. Calmly, I explained, the facility staff are informed and know about my situation, so everything's fine. Wait, when did you even set all this up? Were you preparing all along? Ken questioned. Yes, even before I met you. In fact, I had been considering my retirement and had an eye on a particular facility, more like a condo. After an injury during my hospital stay, I delved into various investment books, diversifying my investments between my salary and my parents' inheritance. The facility I had my eye on, I had already purchased and had been renting it out for income. I never mentioned this to Ken. It's my hidden asset. We don't need to get a divorce. I get it. You can stay here. Let's live with my parents. Do you not get it? Why would I ever do that? He seemed pretty dense. Even after bringing up divorce, he still believed he was the only one for me. Sorry, but my mind's made up. What's your problem? You're so selfish. If you come crying back later, it's not my problem. I won't be, so don't worry. Ken fell silent, deep in thought, for what seemed like hours. During that time, I started packing up my things. Then I heard Ken making a phone call, likely talking to his parents. It seemed pathetic, relying on them for such decisions. Eventually, Ken approached me. Fine, we'll get a divorce. Just leave quickly. Ken said begrudgingly, perhaps realizing he might miss having me around like a housemaid. But he probably thought that living with his parents would save him from household chores. He has a house, and it's fully furnished. No issues for daily life, at least for now. With that thought, he headed back to his parents' home. I'm going to talk to my folks about what's next. Get ready to move out quickly. Yes, I'll do that. I finished moving all my stuff within a week, and during that time, Ken never showed up. We met again a day after the move was done, as I was trying to start my new life in my new house. Ken called me outside and said, "Hey, what's going on? This place is almost empty. Where are the appliances?" I had a service pick up those items for me. I called the service the next day and had them collect all the furniture and appliances. My husband became agitated and started grumbling. Not only Ken, but also his parents were there. All the appliances here were bought by me. They are all from when I was single. The only thing that's yours is right there. There were only 3 cardboard boxes. I did leave the clear clothing container we bought after marriage. Michelle, we can't live with this. We need to split the property if we're divorcing. That's right. We can't live here like this. What are you talking about? Nobody can live here. What do you mean? The rent's $2,000? Ken and his parents were stunned. I told Ken when we got married, this isn't your own house. No, it isn't. I got a bit of a discount on the rent because I asked a real estate agent I know. If I move out, the rent will go up even more, given that this is a property with disability access, and I've already received several inquiries from people with the same concerns. I recommended that they move out. Why didn't you tell us sooner? What are we going to do now? Ken's mother was notably agitated. I don't know. I did tell Ken. I didn't hear about it. I'll sue you. Ken threatened. I saw that coming. Honestly, from an outsider's perspective, it might look like I selfishly got a divorce, broke the lease, and took all the furniture and appliances. But I was sure you can sue. But do you even have the money for it? Ken's face twisted. He couldn't afford a lawyer, even if by some miracle he could. I have an ace up my sleeve. I showed them some pictures. When did you take these? The pictures showed Ken gambling and womanizing. I spent my money on this. I'm ready to use these in court, Ken. What the hell? I thought everything was going well. His parents were particularly agitated. What's going on? Then suddenly, Ken started to apologize. I'm sorry. Please come back. I need you, Michelle. You're the one who kicked me out. We're already divorced. So what are you talking about? Besides, you don't love me, do you? If that's the case, I'll just leave then. This time, even Ken's parents began to apologize next to him. We don't have a place to live anymore. That was a shock. What do you mean? Our house got foreclosed on. Turns out Ken's family home will be repossessed in a few weeks. They've gone bankrupt. The debt that his father accumulated grew like a snowball and became an amount that's impossible for retirees to pay. Ken, who used to receive an allowance from his parents when he was single, probably thought he was in trouble and decided to get married, hoping for support. Now I understand why his mother was so kind before we got married. I can't help you now. We're strangers. Even if my folks and I end up homeless, are you okay with that? You brought it on yourself, didn't you? Ken's ulterior motive was clear as day. I firmly told him I had no intention of giving him even one piece of furniture or electronics. Please don't say that. Have some mercy. It's too late for apologies. Now sort it out on your own. That's why I'm asking. I can't sort it out. I told Ken and his father, who were so persistent, that if they couldn't pay the rent, they should move out. The place is in my name, so if I cancel the lease, that's the end of it. Evicting them was easy. In the end, even if the lease was transferred, Ken probably couldn't afford to live here. I heard all of this from the real estate agent. I can't pay the rent. In the end, I decided to cancel the lease here. I no longer need this place, and since the divorce is final, everything is over. I somehow kicked out the stunned family of 3 and locked the door. What are we going to do now? I can move into a facility. Goodbye. Facilities like that probably have no freedom and are the worst, right? Good luck in that crappy environment. Maybe Ken felt unsatisfied, not having the last word because he spat out those bitter words. I ignored Ken and his parents and left the scene. But Ken wasn't going to stay put. A few days later, he showed up at the facility where I had moved. Hey, what's this about? Looking at the facility where I was, Ken looked like he was about to faint. It's not a crappy environment at all. It's a luxury facility worth $1 million. I had saved up money, and with the earnings from my investments, I bought this place. The previous occupant had left at the perfect time, so I was able to move in immediately. With the sale of my house and some extra income, I still had plenty left over. This facility is top-notch, with doctors and helpers on site. The floor plan is just like an apartment, with plenty of privacy. The room is a 3-bedroom, so families can live together. There are even couples and families living here. I can call a helper with the push of a button, and there's assisted bathing every day. I originally thought of this as my final residence, but I'm glad I made the move. You had this much money then? Why? I really don't want you coming all the way here. We're strangers now. Please leave. Then Ken suddenly started acting all sweet toward me. Honestly, it's creepy. Can't you just let me live here? What are you talking about? That's impossible. We're divorced. Face reality. That's why. Let's get remarried. I'm living in a motel now. Isn't that pitiful? I can't get a job because I don't have an address at the motel. He's such a smooth talker. He seems to have quickly abandoned his own parents. In the end, he only thinks about himself. Why don't you take a look in the mirror? You look pathetic, living off your parents at your age, becoming a freeloader after marriage, and now begging on the streets. Ken's face turned bright red. You're not ashamed to be clinging to your ex-wife. Look, everyone's watching, aren't they? Residents peeking from their balconies were watching. Actually, I had asked them in advance to look out if my ex-husband came to visit. I thought Ken would surely come looking for me at least once, either to gloat over my miserable state in the facility or to beg. The residents were very cooperative. They purposely looked at Ken with pity. It's like a real-life drama. I want to applaud them. Ken finally noticed the stares and seemed to realize how embarrassing he was being. I won't ask anymore. With a pale face, he muttered those words and disappeared. I don't think he'll come here anymore. Later, when I went out, I ran into my mother-in-law working at a supermarket checkout. My father-in-law was a janitor, and my mother-in-law was a cashier. As soon as my mother-in-law spotted me, she turned her face and tried to hide. She was being scolded by a young employee for her attitude. Ken was apparently introduced to a job by someone he met at the motel cafe and was being exploited at a very low-paying job site. I frequently host home parties and live happily every day with people from the same facility. I also became good friends with other wheelchair users. If I had known such a community existed, I would have moved here sooner. I found the time to attend physical therapy sessions. My current goal is to get my legs moving on my own. I lead a fulfilling life both at work and in private. You need to get out of that wheelchair quickly, or you might get hurt. I could hear Tyler's happy voice behind me as I desperately tried to stop the wheelchair from speeding up. I pulled on the brakes as hard as I could with my hands. Tyler was someone who didn't care much about money, but we were supposed to be celebrating our love that day. As I struggled with the out-of-control wheelchair, I felt more angry than sad. Suddenly, something got caught, and I was thrown out of the wheelchair. There was a loud noise, and I blacked out. The next day, I woke up in a hospital room. Tyler was crying on the next bed. After a while, he noticed me and started talking, trying to sound comforting. "Are you okay, Amy?" "I'm glad," he said with a forced smile. Then he started talking about how he got hit by a car and lost his leg. He became more emotional and showed me his amputated leg under the blanket. "Hey, you're going to help me, right? We're married, aren't we?" he said, expecting me to agree. But I refused. Tyler was shocked. "Who's going to help me then?" he asked. I decided to share my thoughts. I told him about myself, that I'm Amy Moore, a 45-year-old illustrator who used to love being active. I even competed in national swimming competitions when I was younger. But about 2 years ago, I got a disease that made my left leg weak. Now, I can't walk without a wheelchair. I explained how Tyler and I met at a group date and fell in love. We got married after dating for 3 years. We were happy until I became disabled. That's when Tyler's attitude changed. He started demanding money from my family to make our home accessible and to hire a helper. When I told him I planned to use my savings for that, he got upset worrying that it would affect his inheritance. Tyler tried to apologize and backtrack, saying he thought we would need a lot of money from now on, but I saw through his excuses. I didn't trust Tyler's excuses. He seemed obsessed with keeping our money intact. Despite my doubts, I tried to convince myself that it was just his usual stinginess. Tyler kept bringing up inheritance and insurance. His excuses turned into suggestions like upgrading our insurance policy. I couldn't understand why he was so fixated on money. In the end, despite Tyler's protests, I decided to use my savings and bonus to make our home wheelchair accessible. I also hired a housekeeping service 3 times a week to help with chores. The woman in charge was kind, and I enjoyed chatting with her during breaks. But Tyler seemed to dislike her. He nitpicked everything she did, from folding laundry to washing dishes. His complaints annoyed me, and one day, I exploded in anger. Tyler's response shocked me. He said he'd deduct the amount we paid the housekeeper from our living expenses. That meant I'd have to cover the extra cost, as Tyler planned to keep that money for himself. I was stunned. Our living expenses were already tight, and tripling my contribution wasn't feasible. Tyler didn't seem to care. He thought since I was earning, I should foot the bill. But my income wasn't enough to cover such a huge increase in expenses. However, Tyler didn't show any signs of backing down. He agreed, but asked me to make sure to save that extra $1,000 properly. With Tyler agreeing so cheerfully, I couldn't shake off the anxiety building inside me. And unfortunately, my worries soon came true. Tyler stopped griping about the housekeeping agency, but in turn he stopped helping with any chores around the house. I tried to remind him that we still needed to pitch in with daily chores, even though we hired help. But Tyler brushed it off, saying that since we were paying for it, they should do everything. He started spending more time away from home, barely talking to me when we did cross paths, wearing a disgusted expression on his face. Thoughts of divorce crept into my mind. Then out of the blue, Tyler suggested we go see the cherry blossoms at the botanical garden. It was a surprising invitation after 2 months of minimal interaction. His cheerful demeanor during our outing momentarily eased my troubled heart. Maybe our recent problems stemmed from not talking enough, I thought optimistically. But as we strolled, Tyler dropped a bombshell. He confessed that he was out of money and needed my insurance payout urgently. Confused and alarmed, I panicked when I realized he was pushing my wheelchair downhill without my control. Desperately, I tried to stop the speeding wheelchair, but Tyler's voice echoed merrily behind me, warning me of the danger. Despite my efforts to hit the brakes, the wheelchair hit an obstacle, throwing me off, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital room. Tyler was beside me on the next bed, crying. After noticing I was awake, he spoke to me with a pleading smile. "Amy, you're safe. I'm glad. I was hit by a car. My leg. Tyler became increasingly emotional and uncovered himself, revealing that he only had one leg. "You'll help me, right? We're husband and wife, aren't we?" "I refuse," I replied firmly. Tyler was stunned. He never expected me to refuse. Speechless, he stared at me. Why would I help someone who pushed me down a hill just to get insurance money? It was a moment of madness. I regret it. Saying sorry won't fix everything. If you were supposed to save $1,000 a month for me, what happened to that? "I am doing that," Tyler stammered. "Oh, really? Then you can pay for this hospital stay with that money." Tyler panicked because his bank account was almost empty. I knew this because I managed our finances and kept track of our bank accounts. I discovered that instead of saving money, Tyler was sending it to another woman. I hired a detective and found out Tyler had cheated on me and had a child with his affair partner. The money was going to his affair partner as child support for his kid, 4 years old. Cute age, huh? Have you been visiting her? How long have you known? "A month now," I revealed. Tyler was shocked. Then I dropped another bomb on him. "Really? I was shocked because you're paying child support for someone else's child." Tyler looked confused because he believed the child was his own. I couldn't help but laugh. "What the hell are you talking about? That kid is truly mine," Tyler said angrily. Hearing this, I burst out laughing even more. Tyler looked at me as if I was something creepy. So, I decided to reveal the truth to him. "You see, you can't even have children," I said, laughing at his bewildered expression. "Since we met, you really thought I was the reason we couldn't have kids. Well, I was considerate and didn't tell you, but your father knows." "It's a lie," Tyler said, his face drained of color. In reality, we had been trying infertility treatments for about 3 years since we got married. Tyler reluctantly took the test, and it turned out the issue was with him. But after discussing with my father-in-law, we decided not to tell Tyler. My father-in-law believed Tyler, who was emotionally fragile, wouldn't handle the news well. After explaining all this, Tyler suddenly called someone on his phone. "Hey, you had an affair, didn't you? The kid isn't mine, is it?" Tyler yelled into the phone. I realized he was talking to his affair partner. They argued back and forth, but it seemed Tyler was getting nowhere. At that moment, I couldn't help but laugh when I heard Tyler accuse her of having an affair too. Ignoring Tyler's heated conversation, I brought the discussion back to us. "Remember signing the papers when we decided to save that $1,000 you spent?" I asked. Tyler seemed dismissive, but I sighed, knowing he probably planned to backtrack anyway. I showed him a photo on my phone. "It's written here that in the event of misuse, divorce, and the entire amount spent up to the discovered month will be paid to the wife, Amy. It's properly checked. And there's a signature too, right? It's even notarized." Tyler looked frustrated, then turned to me with desperate eyes. "Please, Amy, I was just possessed. Please don't say divorce, okay? Besides, I can't pay such a large amount. Divorce is settled. I can't do it anymore. But don't worry, you can pay the spent amount in installments." Seeing him like that, with a face like he was the victim, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. I sighed and called out to the figure hiding at the entrance of the hospital room. "Please come in, Dad." As his father-in-law entered, Tyler shouted, but his father-in-law's face was red with anger. "This is the end of our relationship." "What are you talking about?" Tyler asked, confused. His father-in-law came over to me, apologizing. "I'm truly sorry. I won't ask for forgiveness, and it's fine if you don't. Please file a complaint. I'm just glad Amy is safe. Thank you." I could see tears streaming down his face, and I glared at Tyler, knowing he was the reason for making my beloved father-in-law feel this way. "Don't you feel anything seeing this? It's your fault. Always spending money, earning more than me, and your rich family is stingy. I don't know why I married you." "So you were after the money too?" I said, feeling like all our beautiful memories had been tainted. My voice was the lowest it had ever been. Tyler looked surprised, and I forced a smile. "Marrying for money, and then having to pay it back in the end. Huh, shut up. I'm not paying." "Too bad. Payment is a done deal," my father-in-law said sternly to Tyler, who went pale and started shaking. Just then, a middle-aged doctor in a white coat entered, interrupting the tense atmosphere. He handed me a document. "Is there a reason you're not receiving treatment for your leg?" he asked. Confused, I looked at Tyler, who avoided my gaze. "If you have surgery on your leg, you'll be able to move again. Didn't you hear that when you were diagnosed before?" The doctor continued. "I didn't hear," I said, looking at Tyler, who remained silent. Realizing something was wrong, I turned to the doctor. "Could you please tell me the diagnosis directly? I didn't hear it at the time." The doctor explained that my illness was temporary paralysis caused by a herniated disc, and with rehabilitation, I would be able to walk again. Tears welled up in my eyes. I had trusted Tyler's lies about my condition, but now I knew the truth. There's not a shred of affection left. "Tyler, what's going on? Say something." My father-in-law yelled, but Tyler just cried, overwhelmed by everything. And in that moment, I realized that if I were free from Tyler, I could truly roam the world again. I'm always left behind. If she's in a wheelchair, she will always stay home and won't have more fun than me, right? So what? Your selfish jealousy has forced me to live in a wheelchair for 2 years, knowing I could have surgery to eliminate the pain and paralysis, and you kept silent. That's the worst. At my words, Tyler hangs his head in exhaustion. I look at him with cold eyes, and both the doctor and my father-in-law seem angry at Tyler for selfishly denying me my chance for treatment. So, Amy, may I explain the surgery to you tomorrow? The doctor asks. Yes, please do, I say, instantly brightening up. The doctor smiles back warmly, giving me hope for a bright future ahead. I will instruct the nurse to separate the rooms, the doctor says. No, I don't want to be separated from Amy, Tyler loudly refuses, but the doctor ignores him and leaves the room. Amy, you're not really gonna divorce me, right? I'm an amputee, remember? I know I was wrong to keep quiet, but think about our current situation, Tyler pleads. Despite my father-in-law yelling at Tyler for his selfishness, he stands his ground. After about 10 minutes of silence, I reluctantly speak up. Then I'm gonna work and you'll handle the chores. If you ask for a service, you'll pay for it. Oh, and I'll deduct that amount from the living expenses. Tyler protests, saying he can't live like that, but I point out that's exactly what he said to me. Finally noticing, Tyler's face turns pale as he freezes in place. Realizing the gravity of his words, my father-in-law's face also turns pale. It must have been a shock to learn that his son had said such terrible things to his wife. Well, let's talk through lawyers from now on, and about the compensation too, I say, ready to move forward. Wait, Amy, Tyler calls out as a nurse comes into the room. It seems I'm moving rooms so Tyler can't easily barge in anymore. Tyler resists to the end, screaming as I leave the room, his cries fading as the door closes behind me. After being pushed out of the room by the nurse, I met my father-in-law's eyes, and we exchanged nods. That was the last time I saw Tyler. A few months later, I received divorce papers from him through a lawyer, and the divorce was successfully finalized. I heard that Tyler was quite disheartened and is now living under the strict supervision of my father-in-law. Although he managed to keep his clerical job, it seems that news of the divorce leaked, and his colleagues, who were initially concerned about his injury, now look at him coldly. Tyler brought this upon himself, but I heard him lamenting about being harassed by his colleagues. I couldn't help but bitterly smile, realizing he hasn't changed a bit. Despite the divorce, I still meet my father-in-law occasionally. Initially, he seemed apologetic, but recently he's getting back to his usual self. Upon investigation, it was revealed that Tyler's affair partner was married and had been married to the real father of her child. I sent evidence of the affair and child support transfers to her husband, which caused a huge dispute and eventually led to their divorce. Although I received a resentful letter at the lawyer's office, I ignored it. Meanwhile, I underwent surgery immediately after the divorce and spent about 6 months in the hospital for physical therapy. Thanks to my father-in-law's arrangements, I could continue working while staying in a private room. After being discharged, ongoing physical therapy and regular checkups helped me regain mobility, and now I can walk with a cane. Recently, I've been taking walks around the house. I even exchanged contact information with someone I met during these walks and promised to go for a meal. He's a very kind person who helped me when I stumbled and fell over a rock. These days, the exhilarating feeling of a new spring fills me with excitement, and I feel unstoppable. My name is Emily, and at 26, I'm a driven career woman. Currently, I share a home with my husband, John. Lately, I've been contemplating starting a family soon, but John believes we should first focus on building a house and settling down before considering children. Therefore, we're diligently saving money for our future home. Despite my desire to start a family promptly, John remains adamant about his stance. Whenever I broach the topic of children, he reiterates the need to establish our home first. It's disheartening how he disregards my perspective. I resign myself to the idea that I must work harder to contribute to our savings. John and I have been married for a year now, and I've noticed a pattern in our relationship. He rarely considers my opinions, a trait that persisted from our dating days. Initially, I admired his strong convictions, but in marriage, mutual respect for each other's viewpoints is essential. I fear our marriage is faltering, especially with the influence of his parents, who live just a short drive away. John frequently visits his parents, citing reasons like cutting down on expenses. However, I've discovered he indulges in drinks with his coworkers, conveniently omitting these expenses from his frugal calculations. It's perplexing how stringent he is with me about saving, yet lenient with himself. His frugality extends to trivial matters like conserving hot water and turning off lights prematurely, directives he imposes solely on me. If only he extended the same standards to himself, perhaps our relationship wouldn't feel so one-sided. I would be seething with anger. However, he seems to believe it's acceptable to impose his ideas on others. Every week, when we visit his parents' house, a new problem surfaces. Hasn't it been a year since you got married? We want some good news soon. Well, we'll be able to see our grandchild, exclaims both my in-laws, putting immense pressure on me. Glancing at John, sitting beside me, I can tell he's glaring disapprovingly. It's evident he wants to say, "Don't say unnecessary things." While I share the desire for a child, John insists on building our own home first. It's entirely inappropriate for my in-laws to pressure me to have a child in this situation. Rather than advising John, who doesn't listen to my words at all regarding having children, my in-laws persist in pressuring me. Despite wanting to speak up, I'm silenced by their constant pressure for a grandchild. After the meal, John announces, "I'm going out for a smoke. You know, Emily, it seems like you're working, but if you want to be a housewife, you should quit your job and work hard to be a good wife." Maybe that's why John isn't paying attention to you. It feels as though I'm being told I can't have children because I'm working. Despite my strong desire for children, John is the one not thinking about having them anytime soon. "Just quit your job already," urges my in-law. I retort, "It was John who asked me to work. Why don't you talk to John first before constantly lecturing me?" Expressing my anger, I continue, "When it comes to having children, I want them too. But it's John who stubbornly refuses to listen to me until we have our own home. Instead of nagging at me, why don't you make sure you tell your son the truth?" My words leave my in-laws in a state of shock. I excused myself with a simple apology and left the table, making my way towards the entrance. The anger within me extended to John, who leisurely smoked by the entrance. Without saying a word, I climbed into the car, and he followed suit, casually remarking, "Hey, are you leaving already?" Knowing he would never disclose the truth to his parents, I grew weary of the various things my in-laws constantly told me. I declared that I wouldn't be visiting my in-laws' house anymore, and John widened his eyes in surprise. "Why not? We can save on food expenses, right? You also want a home soon and children, don't you?" he questioned. Fed up with the continuous impositions from both him and my in-laws, I snapped back. "If it's about saving, I've told you many times that we would save more if you stopped going to drinking parties or smoking. Instead of driving to your parents' house just to save the cost of one meal, why don't you save in that way? Everyone needs a break." Expressing my frustration, I continued, "You keep imposing things on me, like not using hot water and turning off the lights by 10 p.m. You think we can save money without sacrificing anything. If I have to go through all this trouble alone, then I don't need a home. I'm fed up with this. You never sacrifice anything yourself, but you're okay with imposing it on others." He seemed to downplay the situation, saying it's not a big deal. But I countered, "No, it is a big deal. How much patience do you think I've had all this time?" Moreover, I was infuriated by his pretense in front of his parents, making it appear as if I were the reason we couldn't have grandchildren. I'm tired of being the only one asked to have grandchildren. It's not me who doesn't want children, it's John. I've been saying it for a long time. I want children soon, so please stop being so angry. Seeing John struggle to deal with my unusual anger brought a slight sense of satisfaction, but it didn't resolve everything. Unsure of what to do next, I gazed out of the car window, ignoring John. A turning point for us came a month later when one of my relatives, my father's brother, passed away. With several pieces of land, a luxurious mansion, and a lavish lifestyle, my uncle's passing became a revelation for John. Impressive. I didn't know you had such a remarkable relative, he remarked a few days later. Upon receiving news about my uncle's inheritance, I decided to discuss the details with the lawyer in our apartment. Recognizing that it was a matter exclusively related to me and had no bearing on John, I politely asked him to leave the room, especially since he seemed uneasy about the concept of inheritance. I wanted to spare him any potential trouble that could arise if he got involved. After about 3 hours of listening to the lawyer explain the intricacies of the inheritance, I thanked him and asked him to leave. However, to my surprise, John, who had been at home earlier, was nowhere to be found. Assuming he had probably stepped out to avoid interrupting my conversation with the lawyer, I started preparing dinner. Little did I know, 3 months later, John approached me, expressing, "There's something I want to show you," and took me for a drive. Excitement welled up as we entered a residential area, but my confusion grew when the car parked in front of a certain house. John then pressed the intercom, and my in-laws emerged from inside. However, it was evident that this house was not their home. "You finally made it. When are you and Emily moving over here?" "We're thinking of moving in by the end of this month," announced my father-in-law. He continued blaming me for being a selfish daughter-in-law and accused me of always shifting the responsibility for having children onto John. I shot a disapproving glare at John, bewildered as to why he brought me here when I had clearly stated I wouldn't visit my in-laws anymore. Searching for an explanation, I questioned him, and he simply shrugged, stating, "Don't get so angry. If we live together, we can bridge the gap between you and my mom. Besides, this will be our new home from now on, so you should cooperate on the children issue as well. Live together." His revelation left me in disbelief. I hadn't agreed to living with them, especially after explicitly stating that I wouldn't go to my in-laws' house anymore. The situation was further complicated by the nature of the house. As John disclosed, it's a two-family house. My plan was always for us to live with my parents eventually. "So, what's the problem with living in a two-family house now?" he asked. The question lingered in the air as I mulled over the situation. Living in a two-family house seemed to be a significant issue, especially when considering our savings. According to our financial situation, building such a splendid new house was seemingly impossible. I couldn't fathom how John managed it. "My dad and I chipped in the money, so our savings are empty, but it's fine, right?" John casually mentioned. His nonchalant attitude perplexed me. He continued, "I heard your uncle's inheritance was worth $690,000. So, if you use that money to repay us for the cost of the two-family house, it should be fine, huh?" I was taken aback. The idea that he believed my inheritance should be used to fund the house without my consent baffled me. Even if I were to inherit the money, how I used it should be my decision, not his. Frustrated by my rejection of their proposal, John reached into his bag and pulled out a pre-filled divorce form with his name on it. "Your money is our money. If you don't like living together, let's get a divorce," he declared. I took the divorce form from his hand, expressing, "Fine, if living together is the alternative, then divorce is the better choice." Firmly placing the divorce form into my bag, I turned my back on him and my in-laws, who looked stunned. Ignoring their reactions, I continued, "By the way, I renounced my uncle's inheritance." John froze with a bewildered expression. Without waiting for a response, I took a bus and headed home to our apartment. Upon arrival, I promptly filled in my name on the divorce form, which already had John's name on it. I then submitted the divorce papers and immediately purchased cardboard boxes at a home improvement store to start preparing for the move. Recognizing that I couldn't handle the move alone, I hired a moving company. Fortunately, it turned out that not many moves were happening during this season, allowing for a quick relocation. As I packed for the move, a commotion outside the front door indicated John's return. I had the chain lock on, and I addressed him, "Sorry, I had the chain lock on. I don't know what you might do when you're so angry. Besides, I need to finish packing for the move. Could you stay at your parents' house for a few days?" "I won't accept a divorce," John declared, widening my eyes in surprise. I reminded him, "But you handed me the divorce form, didn't you? If you sign the divorce papers, that means you agree to the divorce, you know." Astonished, I questioned whether he truly understood the implications of what he had done. He frowned, appearing frustrated, but quickly changed the subject. "Why would you give up on a $690,000 inheritance? Normally, you'd inherit it," he questioned. It seemed he had overheard some details about the inheritance but hadn't grasped the full story. Likely, after learning about the $690,000 inheritance, he had rushed to my in-laws, and they impulsively purchased the two-family house without considering the consequences. I explained, "The inheritance discussion came to me because there wasn't anyone else to inherit it. My uncle had 3 sons, 2 daughters, a wife, and grandchildren. However, all of them renounced the inheritance, so it ended up coming to me. My uncle did have $690,000, but he had to demolish his mansion, spend a lot on maintaining his land, and had plenty of debt. I realized that renouncing the inheritance was a better choice than inheriting it." John was in disbelief, exclaiming, "No way. So even if you had inherited $690,000, you're saying there wouldn't have been much money left? That's fraud." I explained that the lawyer and I had a proper discussion about it, but someone had eavesdropped and left before hearing the whole story. My words left him speechless, and perhaps he finally realized he was in the wrong. However, I asserted, "It's too late now. You betrayed my trust. We've already filed for a divorce, and you and I are no longer a couple. Why are you suddenly saying you don't want a divorce now? If you truly didn't want a divorce, you should have followed me right away when I returned, shouldn't you?" I reminded him of the consequences of his actions, emphasizing that his mother's opinion about the divorce didn't change the fact that he and his father had invested in the two-family house. His mother's lack of experience with work didn't allow her to fully appreciate the value of money. I sighed, realizing it wasn't my role to listen to his complaints about his parents. If we were still a married couple, I might have entertained the conversation. However, I reminded him, "You haven't submitted the divorce papers yet, have you?" He pleaded, "If you do it now, we can still be a couple. Please, let's live together in that two-family house." "I've already submitted the divorce papers, so it's pointless now," I replied. His expression slumped in front of the apartment door, appearing bewildered and lost. While I believed he brought this upon himself, I couldn't let him linger outside forever. Briefly considering sending him away, I realized I had no time to waste, so I continued with my preparations for the move. After a while, he was gone, and I proceeded with the move, informing my workplace about the divorce, especially since my boss had acted as our mediator. Feeling obligated to apologize for the divorce, I also shared the news with my coworkers who had been invited to our wedding during lunch break. Unexpectedly, he burst into my department in front of my coworkers, claiming, "It's absurd that you're talking about the divorce. I wish you hadn't mentioned it." He disclosed the situation in his department, assuming I had inherited an estate and suggested buying a two-family house. When faced with the choice between divorce or living together, I chose divorce. Consequently, he found himself being avoided by everyone. I even received sympathy from colleagues. Eventually, he quit his job. During this time, a male colleague confessed to me, saying, "I've actually liked you for a long time. I hope to build a home where we can communicate as a couple and work things out together."
So here's the deal. I'm going to buy that fancy car from you. Margareta doesn't need it. She's just a regular person. My parents mentioned they wanted a new car, and since I got married to Brandon, he's been acting pretty selfish. He's been eyeing up the nice car my parents gave me, and I've had enough of it. My name's Margareta. I'm 25, and I met Brandon in college. We've been married for 2 years now. Brandon is outgoing and popular. Unlike me, I'm shy and don't have many friends. We started talking more during college classes, then we began studying together. I never thought someone like Brandon would be interested in me, but he surprised me by asking me out. I was really happy and said yes right away. That's how our relationship started. It made sense why I liked Brandon. He was handsome, friendly, and serious about his studies. But for him, things should have been different. He had lots of cute, stylish female friends. Finding another girlfriend wouldn't have been hard for him. Once, I bravely asked him, "Do you really think I'm the right one for you?" He seemed surprised and asked why I was bringing it up. I admitted, I'm not very confident. I wanted to know why he chose me. After thinking for a moment, he said, "I guess it's comfortable being with you." I wasn't satisfied, but before I could say anything, he seemed annoyed and started playing with his phone. Not wanting to argue, I quickly ended the conversation. "Yeah, you're right. Sorry for bringing it up." Even though I still had doubts, our relationship kept going smoothly. Time passed quickly. We finished college, got married, and moved into a condo. I got a job at a regular company while Brandon went off to do more school and research. When I told my mom we were getting married, she was really happy. She said, "That's great news." We were starting to worry. "We thought you'd introduce us to a boyfriend sooner." I felt bad for not telling them about Brandon earlier, but Mom understood. She said I've always been independent, handling things on my own. Knowing Brandon was there for me made her feel better. My parents met in college and still love each other a lot, which I admire. Dad worked hard, climbing up the ladder at a big company. Mom supported him and also pursued her passion for cooking. She became really good at it and even teaches cooking classes now. They respected each other's lives and gave each other space. Growing up with them, I learned to be independent too. I wasn't great at much except studying, so I didn't go to grad school. I wanted to be self-sufficient and start my own life soon. Even though I grew up in a well-off family, I didn't want to rely on them forever. I wanted to have a family of my own, like Mom and Dad. I hope to make them proud by having kids someday. It might sound simple, but for someone like me, it's a big goal. Once we moved in together, Brandon started acting more selfishly. He was a grad student and worked part-time, but he didn't pitch in much for our living costs. I tried bringing it up gently, saying, "Hey, Brandon, it would be really helpful if you could contribute more of your part-time earnings towards our expenses." But he just coldly replied, "I do contribute some, you know. And didn't you say you'd handle the living expenses when we moved in together, Margareta?" Brandon always talked about wanting to be a professor, which is why he went to grad school. I had assured him not to worry about money when we got married, telling him I had a good job. I murmured, "Yeah, I did say that," feeling unsure about what to say next. Brandon sighed heavily. "You wouldn't get it. Being a grad student costs a lot for socializing and stuff. Oh, and by the way, I need money for a research trip. Can you lend me $500? I'll pay you back later." Brandon's financial pressure became more common and our problems got worse. He started spending more nights away from home, leaving me waiting by the phone with cold meals in front of me. When he did come home happy for a change, I was too forgiving. He'd sometimes say things like, "Hey, Margarita, remember you wanted to go somewhere? I have tomorrow off, let's go." He'd bring up outings out of nowhere or compliment my cooking, making me feel special. Each time he was nice to me, I'd catch a glimpse of the happy married life I wanted, and it made me hesitate. But I knew this wasn't normal. I felt lonely and anxious, but I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't want to upset my parents, who were thrilled about our marriage, but they must have started to notice something wasn't right. When I finally visited my parents after a long time, Dad suggested I stay over and have dinner with them. Mom cooked a big meal to welcome me back. During dinner, Dad mentioned my Aunt Ellen had visited recently and wanted to see me. He said she's always spontaneous like that. Ellen was lively, ambitious, and independent. "I'll reach out to her soon, thanks, Dad." Dad mentioned how much my Aunt Ellen loved me and how she always teased about Brandon stealing me from her, even though she didn't want to get married herself. That's just how she was. Before I met Brandon, Ellen was more like a close friend than an aunt. I could talk to her about anything, even things I couldn't tell my parents. She understood me better than anyone and was always there for me. At first, I was too shy to tell her about Brandon, but I wanted to see her again and show her I was doing okay. A few days after staying with my parents, I met Ellen at a cafe. She was dressed really stylishly, as usual. Ellen checked out my outfit and said gently, "You know, Margarita, marriage is just the start of a lifelong journey for a woman. You should always feel confident and attractive, no matter what. Your clothes can make a big difference, so don't forget to take care of yourself." Then she took a sip of her tea gracefully. "I totally forgot about fashion lately. I'm sorry for not keeping in touch for so long," I murmured apologetically. Ellen replied, "That's typical of you, Margarita. It's good to be honest and serious, but being too timid usually comes from lack of experience. But I was thrilled when I heard you found someone special. I thought, finally, Margarita is taking a step forward." It had been ages since I spent time with someone outside on a day off, and the weather was perfect. We sat on the terrace, basking in the warm sunlight. In that peaceful moment, I felt like I could talk to Ellen about my worries without feeling too down. I had hoped even someone as shy as me could make it work with Brandon at first. But Ellen listened to my whole story without interrupting, just nodding kindly. When I finished, she asked, "I suppose you haven't mentioned this to your parents, have you, Margarita?" "No, I even hesitated to tell you today. I didn't want to admit my weaknesses to anyone. I thought I should be able to handle this on my own, to be truly independent. I know if Mom and Dad found out, they'd want to bring me back home right away. So I want to try to deal with this by myself as much as possible." Ellen respected my decision and didn't push further, but she added, "If you ever really need help, let me know first. If my dear Margarita asks for help, I'll be there for you no matter where I am." A month later, Mom called and said, "When you have time, could you come over? It's not urgent." Since I had the next day off, I went to see my parents. When I saw a car parked in the driveway, I couldn't contain my excitement. "Dad, is this car new? Did you just get it? Dad, can I really take it for a spin? What if I crash it?" I teased, feeling excited about the fancy car. "Don't worry about that. This card is for you, Margarita. Use it however you like. It'll come in handy," Mom whispered to me. "We saw this car in a TV commercial, and you said you liked it," Dad recalled. "So it's our gift to you. You've been going through a tough time lately, so we wanted to cheer you up. If things get tough, just drive this and come home anytime," he said with a warm smile. The car Dad got for me was an SUV from a famous foreign brand, and he even arranged a parking spot near my condo. I couldn't believe it, and I laughed in disbelief. Later, when I was driving downtown, I reached into my pocket, found the car key, and pressed the button. The lights flashed in all directions. Just then, I heard a familiar voice calling out from behind. "What's with the car?" I turned to see Brandon, my husband, who hadn't been home in a while. It felt like we were living separate lives. I was speechless as he looked at the car with a smug expression. "Ah, I see. A gift from your parents, right?" Every time I faced Brandon, I struggled to find my voice, but I was tired of feeling that way. "Brandon, don't you care anymore? Do you even care about me?" I managed to say, gathering my courage. Then Brandon said something shocking. "Are you just realizing now? Did you really think I loved you all this time? It's ridiculous how hopeful you are." His dry laugh rang in my ears. Something inside me snapped, and I blurted out, louder than usual, "Then why did you marry me?" "Wow, really? You're going to be that cold about it?" I couldn't believe what Brandon was saying. "So marrying me was just a meal ticket for you, huh? And now you want the car too because it's wasted on me? That's just great." Brandon didn't seem to care about how hurtful his words were. "And if you say no, we're getting divorced. Without me, you'll never find another man. So think about it." With those words, Brandon left without a second thought, leaving me feeling angry and heartbroken, my head pounding with a headache. I sat in the driver's seat for a while, trying to calm down. Eventually, I called my Aunt Ellen for advice. A few days later, I agreed to the divorce and moved back in with my parents. They welcomed me with open arms, and life started to feel peaceful again. But that peace was short-lived. One afternoon, Brandon showed up at my parents' house with his parents. They sat down in the living room, and Brandon's father spoke up in a stern tone. "We're here to talk about our son's divorce. It's urgent." When drafting the divorce papers, Margareta warned Brandon, "If you don't agree to the divorce, I'll use my parents' connections at the university to ruin your future. It wouldn't be hard to damage the career of a junior registrar if their daughter complains." Brandon truly loved Margareta. Her behavior was too harsh. It's clear she was trying to intimidate him. "We could easily challenge the divorce," Brandon's father said, feeling deceived by Margareta. Behind her plain appearance, she's actually a mean and greedy woman. Poor Brandon. I heard she paid him to stay away. She must have had other men over. We need to go to family court and claim that Brandon was threatened by his wife. But if there's a proper apology, things might change. For example, if Margareta gives up that car she's driving, it might help smooth things over. Brandon and his parents remained silent, just listening to their parents' protests. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and Mom went to answer it. Ellen appeared behind Mom as she came back to the living room. "Sorry I'm late. How's the discussion going?" Brandon's family had met Ellen once at my wedding. "What are you doing here? It's rude to barge in like that. We're busy right now. Outsiders should leave," Brandon's mother objected. No, don't be like that. You've heard about Brandon's divorce, right? How would an outsider like you know about that? I had been informed by my brother earlier. I couldn't miss such an important moment for my dear niece," Ellen said, offering a reassuring glance. "You're probably here to stop the divorce or for money. Can you still say that after seeing this?" Ellen pulled out a stack of documents from her bag, laid them out on the table, and showed them to everyone. "I hired a detective to look into this. It turns out Brandon has been cheating on Margareta with multiple women despite being married. He hardly came home because of it. He took advantage of Margareta's kindness and even asked her for money. That's ridiculous. I was just busy with my research at the university. When I did come home, we ate together and went on trips, right? We were like any other married couple, right, Margareta? Say something." "Brandon, you don't need to defend yourself. We'll handle this. It's not your fault. We understand," his father reassured him. "That's right. These documents from who knows where are surely lies. Our Brandon would never cheat. He's such a kind and outstanding son," his mother protested. "You might be kind to your parents, but that kindness seems to end there. Like father, like son." "Now, Brandon's mother, take a look at these photos," Ellen said, pulling out a picture from the documents. "I recently stayed at a hotel for a business meeting and saw Nicholas there. He was with another woman, looking very cozy. So I had the detective look into Nicholas too. The results were just as I expected. Do you understand now?" Brandon's mother's face went pale as she grabbed the documents and examined them closely. "What is this, Nicholas? How long have you been doing this? It's all lies, isn't it, Veronica? Stop looking. Give me that." Nicholas, looking panicked, tried to snatch the documents, but it was too late. Veronica, distraught, confronted Nicholas. "You've been cheating on me. The car you wanted so badly was for her in these photos, wasn't it?" No matter how hard Nicholas tried to calm her down, Veronica wouldn't listen. The discussion about Brandon's divorce was forgotten as Veronica stormed out of the house, crying, with Nicholas following after her. Left behind, Brandon said, "Hey, wait, what about me?" and followed them out in confusion. The rest of us were left in stunned silence for a while, but Aylin had a satisfied look on her face, winking at me. Later, Aylin told me that Brandon's parents did end up getting divorced. "You won't fall for such a terrible man again. Let's make you more attractive. I'll teach you everything about grooming yourself as a woman." Despite her busy schedule, Ellen visited me often and took me to various places like meals and shopping trips. During that time, I learned a lot from her. A year after the divorce, I made the decision to go to graduate school. I worked hard to improve myself, focusing on my studies. Time passed quickly, and one day, I heard someone call my name at a street intersection. I turned around to see Brandon. "It's been a while. You've changed a lot, haven't you?" At first, I didn't even recognize him. In Brandon's eyes, the woman standing before him was no longer the plain ex-wife he knew, but had transformed into an incredibly beautiful and attractive woman. Meanwhile, Brandon had fallen on hard times due to the scandal of his parents' divorce. It seemed he was no longer attending graduate school. His parents, Nicholas and Veronica, had decided to stop providing him with financial support because of the trouble he caused. He was struggling to afford his tuition and living expenses, far from the carefree life he once enjoyed. The women who used to be interested in him had left him one by one. The former glory he once had vanished in an instant, and now he found himself face to face with his ex-wife, who seemed to be a completely different person. As Brandon was about to suggest catching up, a man approached and asked, "Sorry for the wait. Are you a friend of Margarita's?" It was Leonard, the man I was currently dating. Wow, that guy is really handsome, isn't he? He's so tall. Could he be a model? Commented a group of women nearby, looking at Leonard. He's someone from my past, but it's okay. We're finished talking. Let's go, shall we? Leonard said, taking my hand and briefly acknowledging Brandon. Brandon stood there, stunned, as Leonard led me away by the hand. Without a second thought for Brandon, Leonard and I walked towards the crosswalk, and I didn't look back, keeping my gaze straight ahead as we left.